We're about to go into a dark winter. A dark winter.
We're still facing a very dark winter.
We're about to go into a dark winter. A dark winter.
We are a bit concerned about hearing whether camps are springing up as a response to the issues of number 19. When we hear of this, we often think about images from the Second World War and all of the hardships faced by those within these places. And if we see news of it anywhere, one wonders if it could happen where they live.
The American left and their media poodles have long held up New Zealand as the model for how to properly deal with a lot of things, including COVID. But anyone who loves freedom should take note, because the Kiwis have a terrifying new response to rising COVID case numbers. They're throwing people into quarantine camps.
If someone refuses in our facilities to be tested, they have to keep staying. So they won't be able to leave after 14 days. They have to stay on for another 14 days. So it's a pretty good incentive. You either get your tests done and make sure you're cleared, or we will keep you in a facility longer. So I think most people will look at that and say, I'll take the test.
Okay, so what is Operation Dark Winter? And why do we keep hearing Biden parroting that exact phrase? A dark winter's coming, the dark winter's coming, the dark winter's coming. And why did we see through the summer when we opened back up and everybody wasn't laying on the streets dead and piling up bodies on the corners and nowhere to bury them? And, when we saw that we were rebuilding our country and 99% of people under the age of 70 recovered just fine. Even the president, his entire staff, my cousin had it, lots of people got this flu. And before the haters jump in, no, I certainly would not belittle anybody who lost a loved one to this. That's terrible. And no, I'm not a denier that viruses, molecular nanomachines exist. Of course, I believe in science. And any death caused by any of these infections are just horrible. And for anyone to imply, I think, otherwise is just ridiculous. But my son had a regular flu virus and was taken out of here by ambulance and was in the emergency room when he was in kindergarten. And they had to open up the whole pediatric wing. And for 5 months, he fought this virus. A regular flu virus, 5 runs of antibiotics, and finally a triple concoction that they put in an IV through him, and he pulled out of it. But yeah, it was scary when he was coughing and coughing and coughing and couldn't breathe. And, as a mother laying there in the hospital bed with him, it was really traumatic. But after that, I didn't go around to everybody who was like, oh, I got the flu, this sucks, go get me some NyQuil at the store, and be like, you are so insensitive. Don't you know that people die from the flu every year? So I'm just saying, NBC never called to check on my son. CNN didn't even send a card. So I'm not being insensitive. I'm just being a normal human, just talking off the cuff here. So of course, my question is, why such a different response? And why has this first wave played out almost exactly like a script from the Event 201 project? And why is this second wave playing out almost exactly like the simulation called Operation Dark Winter? Second wave, the dark winter is coming. Second wave, the dark winter is coming. Well, as most of you know, Biden's saying that because this was their Operation Dark Winter.
We're about to go into a dark winter. A dark winter.
It's a real thing, not a conspiracy theory. Here I have Johns Hopkins on the screen. This is their official website. I had the Wikipedia on the screen just a second ago. You can go down and it shows all the key players and all of that. And we'll go through all of that information in just a second. It's the second wave of what Bill Gates put on in the Event 201 simulation, which was put on just months before they told us that a real coronavirus was released. It was all about literally a coronavirus, as we all know. And these same players, the World Economic Forum and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, were all the people who put it on. Now, of course, we know the World Economic Forum are the ones who are pushing for the Great Reset right now. They say this is the opportunity. All of the economies are going to collapse anyway. This is the time that we should seize the moment, never let a crisis go to waste, right?
Never waste a good crisis.
You never want a serious crisis to go to waste.
I worked for the Central Bank of Argentina. For 2 years as a senior research manager. Any crisis opens up the space for, so if you look at my sort of longish reply, it's a crisis of the international system that, sort of held during the golden age of capitalism. So periods of crisis are good because they sometimes lead to, the opening up of possibilities for alternative discourses. For good or for bad, whatever you think about, the Soviet system, you had an alternative.
So again, when you're dealing with all of these foreign leaders in the World Economic Forum, it's not a conspiracy theory. They're open about it. They're saying that the West would not allow communism to conquer their nations. But if we bring in a crisis, then it opens up these new avenues of discourse. People will begin to accept communism, or as he said, the Soviet system. And of course, that's exactly what we're seeing manifest in our everyday lives. The Democrat Party did present a candidate, Andrew Yang, that wanted full-on communism, universal basic income, all of that. And of course, he didn't make it past the primaries at all, and instead went to work for CNN, the propaganda machine. So the people wouldn't lay down and accept that on its face. So instead, we have this crisis, and now they're presenting it as stimulus. Only the multi-billionaire richest people will be allowed to be declared essential. You'll have Amazon and Walmart as your company store, and that's where we will control all distribution of goods. Nancy Pelosi and that gang, they're putting forth a plan of basically never-ending lockdowns so that all small businesses are put out of business. There will be no private property. But it's okay because they're going to give you $2,000 a month universal income. I mean, stimulus check. A stimulus, right? To stimulate the economy we just collapsed. You see what I'm saying? So they're bringing in the universal base income anyway, and it's worked because people are already clamoring. Some of the biggest channels on YouTube now are people who daily, hourly give updates because the world is clamoring. When's my next stimulus coming? When's the next stimulus check coming? So where just months ago people were like, no, we're not going to have this new discourse that we're going to become a communist country and let this Marxist coup overthrow our nation. Like, no, universal base income was supposed to be their far left idea, and it wasn't really on the table. But of course, now we see it absolutely is on the table. It's just been, renamed this sort of stimulus heroes package.
That's why we're moving forward with an economic agenda, relieve responsible homeowners, and address the long-term economic challenges of our time.
And don't let it escape you when he said the Central Bank of Argentina, because you guys know, like we talked about the boys from Brazil and about the Nazi regime who escaped. A lot of them went to Argentina and occupied all of these areas. And then that's why we see these tyrannical fascist style socialist governments coming up all through this area. So when we're talking about South America and in our election process and how these voting machines were created for use in Venezuela so that they can take control of the leadership of all these nations, please make note of that, because this isn't just her throwing around, this isn't Sidney Powell just throwing around data that doesn't make any sense. This has been a progressive takeover. It's the same thing the Soviet Union did. Just because they said the Soviet Union is broken up, now they're not a union, that's just Russia or whatever. Clearly, it's not broken up. They just quit calling themselves a union, but they have been lockstep taking over nation after nation after nation for a world empire. And yes, it goes under many names. You can call it socialism, you can call it communism, you can call it the axis of evil, you can call it the New World Order, you can call it the Illuminati, you can call it whatever you want, but it's all one cabal. So anyway, that's why it's so important what's going on in our election and the links to Venezuela. But the World Economic Forum and, like Schwab, these people are all openly from, they're Germans, they're from Argentina, they're open about it, and they're saying, hey, this crisis, this COVID-19 is opening up a dialogue about Soviet-styled options to rescue us from our failed capitalist experiment. That's how they're presenting it. So if you haven't watched those videos, I think the Antarctica series, maybe the Black Awakening, even the one Black Goo about programmable matter, and the Thule Society and Thule Island in the Falkland Islands, all of that, all the same thing. And also keep in mind that all of these countries together this is South America. And here we are right here, the United States. She was also talking about the election fraud, how it went from Venezuela into Cuba. But if you guys have listened to many of the prophets of God, like Dimitri Duduman, David Wilkerson, these are men who have already passed on and gone to be with the Lord, but they had warned us of visions they had decades and decades ago, saying that this invasion of the United States would indeed be coming up through Nicaragua and Guatemala. And I think that's why this border wall thing, for those people in the know that we are hoping are working with us, is so important, because they said, I mean, we know that George Soros sent the caravans and all of that type of thing. But long before all of this was playing out in our news and current events, Dimitri Duduman and David Wilkerson and these people had warned us that God had shown them visions of exactly how these invasions would come into the United States of America. And one of them was exactly through the boys from Brazil. You know, it was through Venezuela and up through Nicaragua and Guatemala. Through South America, coming across our southern border. Another entranceway, they said, would be hopping from Cuba, like we saw during the JFK administration, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Cold War, where Russia had stationed missiles aimed, I mean, look how close this is to us. They had put nuclear missiles, not just bombs, conventional bombs, nuclear missiles right here, this close to us. And that's 100% fact. So for everybody who's embracing this new Soviet style, you know, takeover, this Marxist coup we're going through, keep in mind they don't have our best interest at heart at all. And that they do things like this, get this close to us and point nuclear missiles right at our major cities. And you guys know that one of the visions that I posted decades ago that's still on here on all of my channels is the one that the Lord showed me, that a nuclear attack on the United States of America on several major cities simultaneously. And here's that video if anybody wants to watch it. It's the bottom one here, the 6-minute one that I posted on this channel July 6th of 2015. I'll try to remember to put that link below in the description box. But over the last several years, I've come to believe that that is one of the nested programs that came out of all of these efforts to impeach the president, you know, Russian collusion. I think that they were preparing us so that when this Russian invasion happens, they're going to blame it on us. They're going to blame it on Trump. They're going to, you know, the people who follow them are going to be very confused about who the real enemy is. So please keep all of this in mind when we're talking about the Great Reset and the World Economic Forum, and we're talking about this election fraud and all of the players in all of this. It's all one thing.
Well, I can hardly wait to put forth all the evidence we have collected on Dominion, starting with the fact it was created to produce altered voting results in Venezuela for Hugo Chavez, and then shipped internationally to manipulate votes for purchase in other countries, including this one. It was funded by money from Venezuela and Cuba, and China has a role in it also. We have sworn witness testimony of why the software was designed. It was designed to rig elections. He was fully briefed on it. He saw it happen in other countries. They did this on purpose. It was calculated. They've done it before. We have evidence from 2016 in California. We have so much evidence, I feel like it's coming in through a fire hose.
There is no evidence of widespread voter fraud. No evidence of widespread flaws in the mail-in voting process.
Sources tell CNN that top aides are suggesting that the defeated President Trump, hold rallies to drum up bogus conspiracies about election fraud.
The GOP keeps spreading completely unsubstantiated claims of voter fraud.
The Attorney General now telling federal prosecutors to look into those unsubstantiated claims of voter fraud.
Now, Tucker?
But she never sent us any evidence, despite a lot of requests, polite requests. When we checked with others around the Trump campaign, people in positions of authority, they told us Powell has never given them any evidence either, nor did she provide any today at the press conference.
There is no evidence of widespread voter fraud. No evidence of widespread flaws in the mail-in voting process.
So the Event 201 simulation dealt with a specific set of objectives that we've nicknamed the first wave. And a huge portion of Event 201 discussed just this, the Mockingbird media and taking control of social networking to control the narrative. If you want news, try NewsMax, America One, news stations like that. But any of this in the mainstream, the only reason that Tucker went back and started doing, like all the dead people who voted and things like that, was to save his own $1 million job. There was such an exodus from Fox after the Chris Wallace debate. Trump not only had to debate Biden, he had to debate Chris Wallace. But I don't think they thought it would be so apparent as it turned out on election night when they called Arizona before any votes were in. And yet over in Georgia and Pennsylvania, when Trump is up by hundreds of thousands of votes with almost all the votes being counted, then they refused to call it. They knew they knew what they were waiting on. And so it became like super obvious. And now everybody knows. In fact, the collapse of Fox News, the mass exodus away from Fox News, is more evidence of what I was saying in the last video, that the people of God are perfectly capable of pivoting on the go as we move through these circumstances, and that in no way, shape, or form were any of those people followers of Fox News. It's exactly the opposite. They only watched Fox News because Fox News was speaking to them about things that they already knew to be true in their heart. And as soon as Fox News started trying to herd them, tried to shepherd them back into the herd with the rest of the leftists, the entire viewership of Fox News, or all the true Christian conservatives, they just left. They did not follow. Jesus Christ says, "My sheep know my voice, and another they will not follow." And now we see the hard evidence that the body of Christ was not following Fox News, because when Fox News veered off left, the body of Christ easily pivoted. In less than 24 hours, they all just pivoted and moved away from Fox News. So we're not just a bunch of brainwashed dupes. Nobody was ever following Fox News. Nobody's following Donald Trump. We're following Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, and we're pretty good about going through this obstacle course. We can pivot on a dime. You guys know I always use this diagram, but yeah, the media is way down here. They're almost on the same level as us. They're so far down here. And that's just the bigwig head of the media conglomerates. The people like Ingram and Tucker, they're not the decision makers in these networks. Tucker's just trying to save his ass. He's just trying to save his own job. Tucker's just doing as he's told. He's revealed his own cowardice. But as they try to save their network from, ultimately imploding, because nobody's going back to Fox now, they do continue to present, conservative perspective pieces to try and get their ratings back up. How's the Bible say it? I think Isaiah calls them greedy dogs, everyone seeking their own. They're all shepherds who lack understanding, and they all turn to their own way to seek their own gain. But like I said, it's so thinly veiled now that it's not veiled. It's all out in the open, and we're choosing sides. Everybody is choosing their side. And those of us who are with Christ, we can see clearly. And it's not just that they all ideologically agree on all of these issues. They are parroting from a script. They all have a script, and they have to toe the line. That is actually presented in Bill Gates's and the World Economic Forum's Event 201 as something that must happen for, the safety of humanity, of course. But yes, the Mockingbird media and the social media conglomerates must fall into line and do their part to control this narrative. And that's what makes it so difficult to fight this battle. This isn't like the first American Revolution where everybody lines up in a row with a musket or something. I mean, it's so intense and diabolical. A lot of people have heard about the server that was confiscated in Frankfurt, Germany, that had all of the raw election data on it before the votes were converted and transferred. But what I wanted to point out here is that server that was allegedly confiscated by the military in Frankfurt, Germany, was at the CIA headquarters. So this is what we're talking about, deep state. And likewise, the case at the district levels that were dismissed by judges that were appointed by the Obama administration when Biden was vice president. So these judges were appointed by the Biden-Obama administration, and they're the ones who are dismissing these cases. And if you've listened to Sidney herself on the non-mainstream channels where they actually air her entire interview, she explains that. And likewise, if you listen to like Dr. Steve Turley, he explains, weeks before they went into these, that this is how it's going to go. Like they don't even present evidence at this level of the hearing. This is the process they go through to get up to the Supreme Court. So that's why it was so important to get the conservative justice on the Supreme Court before the election. And that's why the timing of Justice Ginsburg's death is, nothing short of a miracle. It's like when that Illuminati courier coming from Bavaria to France was struck by lightning. It's almost like an act of God, because she wasn't knocked off or anything. She was almost 90 years old and died of natural causes. But had she hung on another couple of months, this whole scenario would be for naught. Also remembering that she was put in place by the Clintons, so during the Clinton administration. So that's why this is so difficult. It's not just, Republican against Democrat. It's just not. This is a struggle within our own government of people who are communist sympathizers, who are infiltrators, literal infiltrators in our own government at every level of government. And that means bad guys in the CIA. It means bad guys in the courts. It means bad guys in the FBI. This is the task that we have of weeding out this corruption. People make fun of Trump being like, you're fired, you're fired, you're fired, you're fired, as they've gone through, and these people have exposed one by one where their allegiance lies. But this is a really, really big battle, and it's really happening.
With these allegations, these charges, is the FBI already carrying out an investigation of these voting companies where their servers are domiciled? And in at least three instances, we know they're in foreign countries. Tell us where the Justice Department is in all of this.
I wish I knew. I'm not on the inside, so I'm not privy to that information. I know that even Democratic senators and congresspeople for years have reported problems with this system to the FBI and to the government, and nobody's done a blooming thing about it. The people in the election security part of the Department of Homeland Security need to be fired yesterday. They're absolutely ridiculous. Of course, Chris Wray needs to be fired too, because the only FBI interview of any witness was to intimidate him and try to get him to change his truthful testimony 4 hours by an anti-Trump FBI agent. They still have politics infecting the FBI instead of just following the law. We are on the precipice of, this is essentially a new American revolution. And anybody who wants this country to remain free needs to step up right now.
A new American revolution.
While we are talking about the corruption of the FBI, I want to play a clip here from a video that I put up back in April of 2018. It was back during the time of the raid. And I pointed out the eerie similarities of the last time we saw the FBI fight our own president of the United States like this. And that was during the JFK administration with Hoover. So the video is called The Raid, Eerie Similarities, Trump v. FBI and JFK v. Hoover. And you'll notice Rudy Giuliani in the last press conference said that we might be at a point where we need to have a completely different agency that serves the American people, that protects America. The FBI is that far gone. And that's exactly what JFK said. He wanted to disband and abolish the FBI. Once he found out who they actually worked for. And specifically the revelation of the blackmail that they had on Hoover, which ties into this trans agenda thing that I was talking about. But yes, JFK realized that the FBI had become an enemy of America, that they compiled records, much like the big tech companies compile on us, against all of the presidents, and that they had become a weapon of the mob to remove presidents that they didn't want in office, and to make sure that presidents that got caught committing these crime syndicate crimes never got held accountable.
Witnesses who have actually reported.
Where are you, FBI?
And nothing's happened as a result of it.
I don't know where the FBI has been for the last 3 years. I have no idea where the FBI has been for the last 4 years. Explain to me how the FBI concealed a memo in the hand of Brennan to Obama saying that Hillary basically made up the Russian collusion plot. They withheld that for 4 years and cost our country $40 million and 2 impeachment, one attempted, one actual, and then an acquittal proceeding. I don't know where they've been. I don't know where they were on the hard drive. They got it 10 months ago. There are clear crimes revealed on it. Didn't do anything with that. I don't know where they are now. Our country has had its ballots counted, calculated, and manipulated in a foreign country with a company controlled by friends of an enemy of the United States. What do we have to do to get the FBI to wake up? Maybe we need a new agency to protect us.
Maybe we need a new agency to protect us.
The company counting our vote, with control over our vote, is owned by 2 Venezuelans who were allies of Chavez, are present allies of Maduro, with a company whose chairman is a close associate and business partner of George Soros, the biggest donor to the Democrat Party, the biggest donor to Antifa, and the biggest donor to Black Lives Matter. My goodness, what do we have to do to get you to give our people the truth?
Maybe we need a new agency to protect us.
And yes, I'm absolutely aware of the conspiracy theories swirling around Rudy Giuliani and 9/11. I also know that he did go to war against the mob, certain mob families in New York in his career, and clean up that city quite a bit. So you guys know my take on it, that the art of war, we don't know who all of these players are. And yes, I see Sidney Powell's use of the leopard print, and I'll discuss all of that later. But I can show you that it's not as simple as you think it is. There are double agents. There is spycraft. This is the art of war. This is so complex, and you and I simply aren't in the know. But definitely know that I have no expectations that any of this stuff at this level, like I have on the screen, is going to come out in these proceedings. This is the first domino. This is a very superficial level to wake up the masses to the width and the breadth and the depth of this corruption. But certainly in court hearings and the media, this type of stuff is never going to play out. This is stuff that is going to be revealed by God himself. There are much larger celestial events coming that are just so much bigger than this tiny part of the battle that we are in right now. And I'm not under any illusion that these court cases, that this type of thing can be exposed in court. The magnitude of an actual satanic cult, a cabal, and interdimensional entities, demons, literally. When she says a biblical proportion, I'm not sure she's talking on the same level of biblical proportion we are talking on, but I do believe that she is called to do a service to God. So I will explain the leopard and the mob connections here in just a minute. But this is the level that we are talking on in this particular battle. Yes, the Tuskegee experiment and all of these other programs have been exposed in this way through congressional hearings, through this avenue. So can this be the first domino? Yes. And do I think it is? Yes. And even though they won't ever discuss interdimensional entities and the relationship to the Nazi technology and what's going on in Antarctica, they are tracing the chain of this regime through the drug cartels of Colombia, through the communist Venezuela regimes, all the way through Argentina and the boys from Brazil, which leads to Antarctica, and why these Democrat leftist politicians like John Kerry are making all these mysterious visits to something in Antarctica. So can this open a can of worms? Yes, and I'm grateful for it. the CIA corruption and CIA black ops that we're talking about being exposed here aren't Project Pegasus and Project Looking Glass. This is a political front, but it is still important because it's still going to expose this corrupt CIA. It appears that the whistleblower inside Venezuela said that these tech companies that he worked inside of did not come by the technology to design this sort of software on their own. It was given to them by these corrupt CIA agents, which is not an outlandish claim at all for Sidney Powell to make. I think all of us already know that Facebook and Google and all of those were set up by these alphabet agencies. I don't think anybody besides the mainstream media thinks that Mark Zuckerberg, this college kid, just created Facebook to harvest all of the world's data from his dorm room. In fact, we call the alphabet agencies because they go by alphabet: CIA, FBI, MSM, NSA. Those are the alphabet agencies. And who's the parent company of Google and all of this technocracy? Oh yeah, they just call themselves Alphabet. That's the name of the company. I mean, they just rub our faces in it. So for Sidney Powell to make a claim that this software, this Dominion that is also just named Dominion, like I said in the other video, it's a battle for dominion over the world. For Sidney Powell to claim that this software company in Venezuela, it wasn't just created for Chavez, like this little guy Chavez in Venezuela is like the smartest tech giant in the world. For her to say no, she believes that this technology to run this voting scam in all these nations around the world, the same way the communist empire always tried to take over country after country after country, even different ethnicities, communist China, communist North Korea, communist Venezuela, the Soviet Union, Russia.
For both parties.
So you're talking Caucasians, Asians, Latinos. It's not an ethnic group. This is an evil empire, a control structure that we call the New World Order. And she's saying that this voting scandal even goes well beyond the United States of America. That this is huge. And of course, the mainstream media, also the MSM being one of the alphabet agencies, they're like, it's outlandish claims. But people like you and I who are on the DHS roundup list, Biden-Obama DHS roundup list, as, you know, potential domestic terrorists trying to undermine our government and our sacred election process, we've known for a long time that Facebook was created by the CIA and Google and all of it. So of course it wasn't somebody as small as Chavez who created this diabolical voting system software that was to be used in all these different countries.
Why do you think the Justice Department isn't being more aggressive in following up on what you see?
I think the Justice Department has known about this issue for a long time and turned a blind eye to it.
Why though?
I wonder how much the CIA actually had a role in starting this kind of program to begin with, use on other countries.
Why would Donald Trump's Justice Department not be interested in this?
Well, you know, I wish Donald Trump had as much control over the Justice Department as people think he does. It's taken on a life of its own. I don't think even Bill Barr has the control over the Justice Department that he would like to have. And they used him against their own candidates. The Democrats used him against Bernie Sanders in 2016. And somebody even told him what had been done to him when Hillary Clinton won that primary, and he didn't. And instead of standing up for the American people and the right to vote, he sold out.
You're saying Dominion, the Smartmatic Dominion system was used in 2016 when Hillary beat Bernie in the primary?
Yes.
Wow. I don't think we had heard that yet. That's an incredible development right there. And you say he knows that. Bernie Sanders knows that.
Yes, the person who sent me the data told me that they informed Bernie Sanders of all their findings, and he didn't do anything except get enough money to buy another fabulous house. Try and get more stuff up online this week. We've got some website
or just email
issues,
it to
and
us.
of course, people are trying to hack us and everything else. But Democratic Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney wrote the Treasury Secretary about this very issue in 2003, I think it was.
17
So
years
people
ago.
have been complaining about it, and the government's done absolutely nothing except whatever it wants to do. So who is really pulling the strings here and choosing the American officials pursuant to this system? Because it's not the people of the United States of America, and that's supposed to be who it is.
Wow.
I'm telling you, it's been used for both parties.
President. What I don't understand is how does this get ignored? I mean, this is a nationwide, this is a democracy shocking scandal, if it is true.
It is.
And it's so big, I can't even wrap my head around it. I just wonder, how does this happen?
Well, that's exactly how it happens, because it's so big, nobody wants to wrap their head around it. Nobody wants to untie all the little knots that go into it.
Yeah.
But we have to if we're going to be a constitutional republic. This cannot go on.
I'm not going to put the clips in here again. I did it in the last video. All you guys pretty much know anyway. Right here is the New York Times doing a piece showing how easily these voting machines are hacked. But here's the new gem of a find, and that's a 2006 CNN piece actually on Smartmatic, on this exact system, Smartmatic, Dominion, this exact system that now the mainstream media, CNN and the New York Times and everybody say, oh, Sidney Powell's this conspiracy theorist, that she would say that these machines could be hacked. Well, here's CNN doing a piece on it, on the exact company, not just on electronic voting machines, on the exact company, Smartmatic, and talking about how they were based in Venezuela and why are our votes being counted in a foreign communist country. And it's funny, of all things, this was Lou Dobbs before he defected from CNN, when they went off the rails and just became full-on propaganda and wouldn't let him do any investigative reporting like this. And he went to Fox News, and now it looks like he's going to have to leave Fox News and go to like NewsMax or America One or something. But anyway, here's that clip from CNN, the same CNN now that says, oh, we're all crazy conspiracy theorists, when their network themselves gave this same exact report about Venezuela and this same exact company. Unbelievable.
A firm owned by Venezuela could be allowed to take over one of this country's top voting machine firms. Venezuela, of course, led by Hugo Chavez, working to change the views of most South American countries, move to the left. Critics of the deal say our nation's very democracy is now for sale, without anyone doing a thing about it. Kitty Pilgrim reports.
The use of some 19,000 electronic voting machines in the city of Chicago and Cook County primary on March 21st of this year is now under intense scrutiny. The U.S. company that makes the machines, Sequoia, was bought in 2005 by Smartmatic, a private company primarily owned by Venezuelan businessmen. When Chicago had problems with the machines, a dozen Venezuelan employees were there to help with the election. Chicago officials are outraged.
I think that American elections ought to be run by American companies and ought to be run by American citizens, not Venezuelan nationals.
Smartmatic is technically based in Boca Raton, Florida, but the president of the company, Jack Blaine, testified to the Chicago City Council. Fewer than a dozen Smartmatic employees work in Florida. The majority of the workers are based in Venezuela. Watchdog groups question why U.S. voting machines would be under the control of citizens of another country, especially a country whose own election process is highly suspect.
We believe this is a national security issue. There is no way that companies belonging to non-U.S. corporations should have access to our elections.
The Treasury Department is supposed to monitor sales of U.S. companies to overseas investors where there is a question of national security, such as in the Dubai ports deal, the so-called CFIUS review process. Some in Congress are demanding an investigation.
In the case of Smartmatic, there are a number of unanswered questions. That's why I wrote to the Secretary of the Treasury and asked them to review the ownership. It's offshore, it's murky, no one seems to know who owns it. Certainly our government should know.
A potential risk to the democratic process.
There is no evidence of widespread voter fraud. No evidence of widespread flaws in the mail-in voting process.
President Trump hold rallies to drum up bogus conspiracies about election fraud.
Completely unsubstantiated claims of voter fraud.
Unsubstantiated claims of voter fraud.
Powell has never given them any evidence either.
And I'm from Illinois, so let me tell you that that really matters what's going on in Chicago. We've dealt with it my entire lifetime, the Chicago corruption. You know, that's where Barack Obama's mansion is. He's from Chicago. And Rahm Emanuel and all of that syndicate, they all come from up here in Chicago. And this is our voting map. This is how we almost always vote. For centuries, it's been like this because they're so population dense. I mean, that's the excuse they use. But as we see now that this corruption is being exposed, I mean, we've all talked about it openly in Illinois forever, that we know that it's because of corruption. It's been the running joke my whole lifetime about all the dead people in Chicago who vote. But now we see it's not just, you know, stuff in the ballot box, it's high tech stuff in the ballot box. But it's interesting that Lou Dobbs was doing this report about Smartmatic in Chicago back in 2006. And like Sidney Powell says, but nobody ever does anything about it. In fact, this year was the first time that it was an actual resolution was on our ballot. We actually got to vote on it in all of these other counties downstate, and to separate Chicago from our state. Let them be their own 51st state so that we can have representation again. This is real. This was on our ballot this year. Almost all the counties in our state want to secede from the Union of Illinois. Let Chicago have it if that's what they want, but we want representation right here. A group of Illinois Republican lawmakers are sponsoring a resolution urging Congress to separate Chicago from the state of Illinois, which would make the nation's third largest city its own state. House Resolution 101 is the latest salvo in a nearly century-old tug of war between rural conservative districts in southern Illinois and urban progressive districts in the Chicagoland area. Suffice it to say, this is personal to me and my family, and nobody's going to be able to convince me that it's impossible that they could be doing the same thing in major cities like Philadelphia to control Pennsylvania, or Detroit to control Michigan, or, you know, everywhere else that we see it all over the nation. Of course they are. And everybody can see it, and we're tired of it. And of course, we know the latest scandal, right? That the Trump campaign statement on their legal team that they released states that Sidney Powell is not on their legal team. So, of course, the mainstream media says, oh, they're so ashamed of these outlandish claims, you know, that she's making about conspiracies and, you know, corruption and the CIA. What? You know, yes, the Trump legal team is distancing itself from Sidney Powell because she is handling a so much bigger part of this battle on a completely different front. You know, Rudy Giuliani and Jenna Ellis and those people are handling like really localized kind of petty crime, ballot fraud and that type of stuff, the mail-in ballots, and they're handling these cases on the local level. Sidney Powell is going after the big enchilada. And in doing so, like she says openly, she has uncovered that politicians in both parties have been using this software and taking taxpayer dollars to the tune of $25 million contracts, $100 million contracts, and giving them to this Dominion software so that they can put these in their state and the counties in their state and, you know, guarantee their own reelection. And she made it clear that in her investigation of Georgia, yeah, that Kemp was involved, and Kemp has been known as a Trump supporter. So you see this revealing, this disclosure of all of these Republicans. Like Chris Christie has been really vocal about attacking Trump. His latest one, he says it's a national embarrassment. You know, so this is where the rubber meets the road. This is the testing that reveals the cowards from the heroes. And just like we saw with Fox News, a lot of people that we thought were pretty decent, their reputations have been ruined. So that's what's going to happen as we go through this. And Trump Pence have separated themselves, made it known to the people that Sidney Powell is practicing law on her own. She is handling a corruption case that is so big, it's not about the Republican Party. She's not defending the Republican Party. This is not about Republican or Democrat. This is about national security. and really international security, because at the end of this video, I'm going to show you what's going on in Australia, New Zealand, all of these other places that are already in almost a complete dark winter. But yes, her public press release is, yes, I quote, "I agree with the statement today. I will represent #we the people and seek the truth. I intend to expose all the fraud and let the chips fall where they may." And if you track this over the days, they said right out that this was about campaign finance law, because his campaign, the Trump campaign, the official Trump campaign, are the ones doing these other legal cases. So for funding, if you want to donate to this cause to expose this and help pay the fees that the legal fees that these attorneys that are working with Sidney Powell have, her financing has to be completely separate. She says, "I never signed a retainer agreement or sent the president or the campaign a bill for my expenses or fees. My intent has always been to expose all the fraud I could find and let the chips fall where they may, whether it be upon Republicans or Democrats." So, straight from the horse's mouth. Now, whether you think that's because her research and her case is going to implicate them once she follows that Kemp line all the way up to Trump, that's up to you. We will see. We will see as this thing unfolds. But it seems from the press conferences that I just showed you that Rudy Giuliani is all in behind exposing the CIA and the FBI and all of these corrupt agencies who have sabotaged our country from within. So I think this is a formality, a political move, because she is going to be exposing people in both parties. But we will see. Like I said, we're ready. We're ready. Bring it on. We want the truth, no matter where that leads. We're going to follow the truth. We're going to follow Jesus wherever he leads. Okay, so let's untangle some of those knots of our own. Let's take a look at some of those clips from that Trump versus FBI, JFK versus Hoover video that I made back in 2018. Because again, this shows Trump is in the Republican Party, JFK was in the Democrat Party, yet they have all these similarities of fighting these same agencies. So just as well as corruption runs through both parties, it appears that the white hats also run through both parties. And to me, the correlation's obvious, because JFK was also at war with his own FBI. J. Edgar Hoover and John Fitzgerald Kennedy were, although both Americans, they were essentially at war with each other. J. Edgar Hoover was constantly trying to blackmail JFK and his administration to lay off of investigating the mafia and investigating the mafia Cold War Russian connections. This is Bobby Kennedy, his attorney general. So you had the White House and the DOJ, Department of Justice, literally at war with their own FBI, with Hoover, because Hoover was compromised and was an agent for the mafia. He protected the mafia. There were congressional hearings about it, and I'm getting ready to show you testimony from actual FBI agents. I'll put their names up. You can research it yourself. I will put the video of them saying it out of their own mouth. This is not supposition. This is history. This is American history. Because yes, just as surely as Donald Trump is at war with McCabe and Comey and Mueller and the FBI trying to take down their own president of the United States, and the FBI protecting the real criminals, like the Clintons and stuff, who we know have the Uranium One scandal and took all the money from Russia, and then they had Chinagate and all of these Whitewater, the laundering money through the Rose Law Firm, and I mean, they've had all of these scandals, and yet they're completely protected by this FBI, which is being disassembled right now. That's why there's all of these firings and stuff taking place. And I don't think the general public, I think they're caught up in the left-right paradigm, so they don't necessarily see what's going on. But what's going on is exactly what was going on during the JFK administration, where J. Edgar Hoover fought JFK. And J. Edgar Hoover was an arm of the mafia because he had been compromised they had tapes on him because of homosexual orgies and sexual perversion, and they used it. They told him to lay off the mafia, even though during the J. Edgar Hoover administration. And see, J. Edgar Hoover he was in office through many presidential administrations. He was kind of the power above the power, because that's what the FBI did. You know, it had just been set up and they collected information and intelligence on everybody. So he had all these files. He specifically built files on all the celebrities, all the politicians, all the presidents, and he would send his people out to them and tell them what he had on them, so that every president, when they got seated in office and inaugurated, they had to make sure that he was appointed as director of the FBI again, or else he was blackmailing them all, because he was the intelligence agency. He had the files on everybody, so he was using that to strong arm all the politicians on behalf of the organized crime syndicate. So anyway, I'm going to play you the clips from some of the congressional hearings and from the other FBI agents that worked during that time, and tons of stuff like that, to show you that this isn't supposition, this isn't conspiracy theory, this is what was going on. And toward the end of his reign of terror, J. Edgar Hoover was still protecting the mafia, yet local police departments organized a sting and a raid and broke up this huge mob meeting of all the heads of the mob families. It was one of the hugest events in history. And even then, J. Edgar Hoover was still denying that there even was an organized crime syndicate. But once the local police circumvented the FBI and handled it on their own and exposed all of this to the public, then J. Edgar Hoover lost his stronghold, and he could no longer blackmail the Department of Justice and JFK and stuff. So it started coming out to light, and when he started to lose his power over the president, well, we know what happened. They moved to Plan B. And both JFK, the President of the United States, was assassinated, and Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General of the Department of Justice, was also assassinated. Okay, I want to start out by showing you that J. Edgar Hoover was actually compromised. He was arrested for prostitution in Louisiana, all of these things. I'll show you that in a minute. But real quick, I want to touch on how they've flipped history upside down for us, this revisionist history that all of the millennials and the younger generation have been taught, a blatant lie, not a conspiracy theory, absolute fact that a handful of people own all of the television broadcasting, all of the news channels, all of the newspapers, this is real. Okay, and by doing that, by buying up the publishing houses and all of this, even the textbook publishing houses that provide the textbooks to all of our schools, which have now become these re-education camps, pushing one party's agenda. Okay, so they succeeded and they've turned history upside down. So now we have Joseph McCarthy, right? This is McCarthyism. Oh, it's a witch hunt. It's McCarthyism. See, the terrible, crazy person that was out to, no, he was doing the same exact thing we're doing today, trying to weed out the cabal, trying to expose that this crime syndicate had infiltrated everything. This was an honorable man. Joseph McCarthy served in World War II in the Marine Corps. He was an intelligence briefing officer. Then he was a senator. And all he did was try to expose to Congress that this crime syndicate had infiltrated the schools and Hollywood and the universities and all of this stuff, and that they were blackmailing people. And he was telling the truth. He's saying exactly what we're saying today. And he tried to warn us way back then, but they smeared him and destroyed him. And now the history books teach that he was a crazy person. The same way as you see that Janet Napolitano and the Obama administration released documents. It was like 3 videos ago I put up. I showed you the actual documents where they sent memos out to the police station saying that conservatives, veterans, that we're all right-wing extremists. Like, this is how they do it, to demonize us, and even try to make us out to be criminals if we disagree with them, or if anybody dare try to investigate them. And we see the same thing throughout all of history. Richard Nixon, again, with the Watergate scandal. Who was he investigating? Right here. The Watergate scandal was a major political scandal that occurred in the United States during the early 1970s following a break-in by 5 men at the DNC, the Democratic National Committee. Funny how Wikipedia says, and everybody pretty much agrees, that Watergate was the biggest scandal in U.S. history, that a president would spy on his opposition's campaign. But when Barack Obama does it and spies on the Trump campaign, then it's just nothing. It's like, oh, that's not a scandal. That's not a crime. That's not Nixon. Nixon left office. Obama's never been held accountable. He's never been held accountable for anything, including deaths of people. Like, remember Eric Holder and the Fast and Furious scandal? Again, this ties in all through South America. The South America and Mexican drug cartels, that crime syndicate. Who were they running guns to? They took our money, American tax dollars, and bought all of these weapons and then gave them to these gangs, gave them to drug-running gangs under the guise of this operation. But then when it came time to perform the operation, they wouldn't let the guys trace the weapons. They were like, stand down, just like Hillary did with Benghazi, just like Kamala Harris is doing with Antifa and BLM. Stand down. They want the police officers to stand down and let them take the cities. Well, the same thing happened when the Obama administration under Eric Holder was running guns to these gangs like MS-13. And probably nobody would have ever even known about it had Border Patrol agent Brian Terry not been killed because of it. And then when they subpoenaed the documents on Fast and Furious, Eric Holder stonewalled and said no, and had Obama declare executive privilege. They just refused to obey the subpoena and turn over the documents. And as most of you know, allegedly, it was MS-13 and these gangs that were armed by Eric Holder through Biden, Obama administration. It wasn't just Obama in office. That was the last time Biden was in office. This was his gang. These are his cohorts. And if you think it's all about Obama, why would Obama be wiretapping and pulling a Watergate on Donald Trump when Obama couldn't even run in that election? He was doing it for his cohorts. But anyway, just like we see Antifa financed by George Soros and all of this, we saw these gangs like MS-13 and these Mexican drug cartels being armed by these same players. Then we see these same gang members show up as like hitmen in like the Seth Rich conspiracy theory. Allegedly, it was MS-13. Allegedly, Fast and Furious armed MS-13. But my point is that we've known about this through all of history. We've been warned about it through all of history. But everybody who tries to investigate this cabal gets smeared and taken down. Joseph McCarthy, they took him down. Nixon, they took him down. JFK, they took him down. Abraham Lincoln, they took him down. So this is serious. What we're seeing going on right now, this FBI war and cabal war against Donald Trump. Anyway, the point that J. Edgar Hoover was indeed compromised also points back to the authenticity of what Joseph McCarthy was saying. They called it the lavender scare, that, oh, Joseph McCarthy was a crazy person. And this is what it said. This included a concurrent lavender scare against suspected homosexuals, as homosexuality was illegal back then. It was against the law. And Joseph McCarthy said it was also perceived to increase a person's risk for blackmail. He knew he was in office at the same time that J. Edgar Hoover was in office, and they would not fight the crime syndicate, and he knew why, and everybody knew why, and here's the clips.
When they arrived at the plaza, Rosenstiel insisted that they enter by a side door.
We went up into the elevator. We went to either the second or the third floor. There was a sign on the door where he led me to, not to disturb. And we knocked on the door, and Roy Cohn opened the door.
According to Susan Rosenstiel, two young men arrived, and first Hoover, then Cohn and Rosenstiel went into the bedroom and had sex with them. Once again, Hoover had allowed himself to be dangerously compromised.
I heard Rosenstiel say that if Hoover ever brings pressure against Lansky or any of us, we'll use this as blackmail. We'll expose him.
Meyer Lansky had some pretty heavy stuff on Hoover, that he was a homosexual, without any question. And he'd shove it to him if he ever had to.
Irving Resnick said Lansky was the guy who controlled the pictures, and he had made his deal with Hoover to lay off. That was the reason that for a long time we had nothing to fear from the FBI.
In the 40s, we hardly touched organized crime because the Bureau did not believe that there was a mafia, or did not allow us to investigate the mafia as such.
For the vital decades of the mafia's growth, Hoover denied that nationally syndicated organized crime existed and ignored all evidence that it did.
Our committee has found that organized crime does operate on a syndicated basis across state lines in the United States. That is a much bigger, more sinister, and a larger operation than we had ever suspected.
In 1951, the Kefauver Committee began to publicly uncover the nationwide structure of organized crime, the importance of bookies like Frank Erickson, and their connection with mobsters like Frank Costello, who controlled them.
The FBI extended no cooperation at all to congressional committees involved in investigating organized crime, beyond giving them a copy of a criminal record sheet.
Even when the mafia murdered 2 committee witnesses, Hoover refused to help.
Far from helping the Kefauver investigation, Hoover and the FBI did their best to obstruct it.
There wasn't one mention of the mafia. There wasn't one mention of organized crime activities during the training course that I and all other brand new FBI agents went through in Washington. Not one mention of it.
In fact, the Bureau in Washington had no organized crime division. When I went to the supervisor in Seattle and asked why we weren't going after the mafia, he said, "We don't use that word. Hoover doesn't acknowledge that there's a mafia."
Then in 1957, mafia chieftains from all over the United States gathered in the small town of Appalachian, New York, to meet at the home of Joseph Barbara. When local police raided this gangland conference and arrested the delegates, it caused a sensation. It also removed Hoover's excuse for inaction.
The discovery of the meeting at Appalachian, New York was a big rise in public interest and government interest in what were these 100 people doing in this rural location in New York State.
Hoover set up the Top Hoodlum program. Agents in every state were ordered. In Washington, D.C., police detectives were picking up intelligence about Hoover's private life.
Guy Hoddle was a retired or fired agent. And Hoddle would, every time he had a few drinks, he would tell stories about parties that went on in J. Edgar Hoover's house when that there were sex parties there. No girls. So when you say sex parties, what does that mean if you have no girls?
Joe Scheiman also heard that years earlier in New Orleans, Hoover had been picked up by the Vice Squad.
And the prostitutes work there. And of course, well, you know and I know that if you have a dozen prostitutes on this work on the streets, you at least have a half a dozen male prostitutes. He picked up one of the pretty boys, and Vice Squad apparently was watching him and arrested him. Now, I don't know the details of the arrest. I never got it, other than he was arrested and charged. Charged with a sex offense. And the arrest was washed out.
In Las Vegas, Hoover's homosexuality was more than a matter of gossip. In the casinos, the wise guys talked about how it gave the mafia a hold over him.
Irving Resnick, who was the Las Vegas representative of the big New England mob family, said in 1971 that Lansky was the one who had, quote, nailed J. Edgar Hoover.
I remember Ash Resnick at the Caesar's Palace. He used to be the manager of the nightclub there. He told me that Meyer Lansky had some pretty strong evidence that Hoover and Tolson were both homosexuals.
When he was asked what that meant, he said that Lansky had obtained photographs of Hoover in a compromising situation with Clyde Tolson.
Novell, who had worked for the White House in the early 1960s, became involved in a complicated legal action, which the White House wanted him to pursue, but which Hoover wanted dropped.
So I went to the White House, and the White House sent me to Mr. Angleton, Director of Counterintelligence, CIA. We met in a restaurant, and I told him my problem, and he says, I know what your problem is. He said, you need to tell Mr. Hoover that you've met with me, and that you're not going to dismiss the lawsuit, and that you've seen this. At which point he opened up his briefcase and pulled out a couple of photographs of of Mr. Hoover in flagrante delicto, I guess is one way to describe it.
Mafia Don Carlos Marcello told Gordon Novell that he too had seen a photograph. In the late 1950s, Hoover was a regular visitor at the home of Meyer Lansky's friend, the former bootlegger Louis Rosenstiel, and his wife Susan.
So make no mistake, it wasn't that there wasn't a crime syndicate or even that it was really up in the air, like nobody knew if there was a crime syndicate. Everybody knew it. But the FBI refused to investigate and prosecute the cabal, the organized crime syndicate. That at that point, now we know it's international. We see with the Clintons and the crime syndicate that it's international. But at this time, they had evidence that it was nationwide through all of these states. They had the evidence, the wiretaps, they had the congressional committees, they had the arrests. They arrested over 100 of the mob heads when they did a sting on a mob boss meeting. That J. Edgar Hoover knew for a fact that this crime syndicate existed. It was clear cut. He refused to prosecute or investigate the mafia, and instead he used all of his investigations and intelligence and all of that against the United States of America, against the President of the United States of America, which is exactly what we're seeing now when we see the FBI attack the President of the United States of America, but will do nothing about the Uranium One case, the cabal, the human trafficking. And now suddenly we see the same exact thing. The people in charge of the blackmailing part of this crime syndicate, like Jeffrey Epstein, all of a sudden he's been allowed to just get away with this his entire life. And now all of a sudden under this administration, he's drug in. Did he enter a witness protection program, or did the mob win this battle? We don't know, because we got Ghislaine Maxwell now. Are there sealed indictments? Is this happening? All I can do is show you the evidence and maybe juxtapose it against something like we saw happen with the FBI during JFK administration. Was that all a show? I know some people still believe it is. Some people don't believe the Holocaust even happened. They've completely been carried away by the cabal to believe none of these things even happened. No, they didn't assassinate all of our presidents, going back to McKinley, anyone who opposed the central bank or anything, no, none of it happened. It's all a big show. Yes, they have crisis actors. Yes, they control the narrative. But in my humble opinion, and I am a vast student of primary documents and of world history and American history and all of this type of, mysteries, like the JFK magic bullet, and I want to throw in my 2 cents. In my opinion, you guys know, if you watch this Jeffrey Epstein conspiracy video, I didn't just talk about the human trafficking connection with Jeffrey Epstein and the blackmail connections. I talked about where he was funneling money. He was funneling money into this exact research that I'm going to talk about in 2 seconds that we see going on in China about using frequencies for mind control. If you haven't watched that video, please go back and watch that hour-and-a-half video, because it's not about the human trafficking, hardly at all. It is all about these experiments with ECOG and these different professors that he was funneling money to at Harvard, some of them who have now been arrested while Trump was in office. What are the odds, you guys? At the very same time that as soon as Trump entered office in 2016, we saw the tech giants called before Congress and being called to account for interfering in the elections, for not allowing conservatives to run ads, for taking down, like Diamond and Silk with millions of followers of influence, and also being questioned about this illegal harvesting of data on all of us, that they're building a database. And when I show you some of the codes later, talk about being put on the red list, blue list, blacklist, some of these codes that have been exposed. I mean, this is some frightening stuff. And it all plays into this dark winter, this second wave. And now we see Jack from Twitter being called on the carpet by President Trump. And he said openly, as soon as they get the resistance out of office, you won't have to worry about Trump anymore. He will remove his voice from society. So, we are, by the third wave, it's the Antichrist reign on the earth. So are there white hats in the government? Is somebody helping us beat back the darkness, hold back this flood, this second wave, this dark winter? It appears so. Now, will that succeed? We saw during JFK era that no, Joseph McCarthy, when he said that all of Hollywood was infiltrated with communists and that they were using their movies and all of that as propaganda, and when he said that the political ranks were filled with communist sympathizers and all of this, to this day, McCarthyism is, like a bad word. But of course, now we see McCarthy was right about everything. Hollywood is full of cabal. Our political ranks are full of the cabal. All of our big tech industries are full of cabal operatives. McCarthy was right. But of course, he died shortly after he said all of that. Also, the Attorney General, Bobby Kennedy, died. Also, JFK died. So does Sidney Powell have a shot at this? Does Donald Trump have a shot at this? Does Bill Barr have a shot at this? That's yet to be seen. And even during the mainstream interview, when Sidney Powell was asked about the server in Frankfurt, Germany, she said outright that, yes, it was seized, but she's not sure. She hasn't been briefed. She's not privy to whether it was seized by the good guys in our government or the bad guys.
Last Friday, we reported that a server related to the U.S. election was seized by U.S. military personnel in Frankfurt, Germany. This story, which was first exposed by Republican Texas Congressman Louis Gourmet in an interview with NewsMax last week, has now come to light. Government affairs expert Brian Trasher, a member of the Trump team's recount committee and a political commentator, told NewsMax in November 18th interview that they have recovered raw data from the servers seized in Germany, which he said will be made public, including information about U.S. election servers, why they were overseas, how ballots were converted from one candidate to another, and how such a massive all-American cheating system worked.
But now that we have seized the servers for Dominion that were over in Germany, and we're starting to get some raw data off of that, I know you guys have a huge audience now, Sean. Congratulations for that. But I want everybody to listen to me. The things that are going to come out are going to shake the globalists to their very core. And when President Trump is declared the winner of this election, what you saw last weekend in the streets, Trump supporters getting attacked in D.C., that's nothing. These people are coming for every city and every suburb, so be prepared because this is happening and you need to protect yourself.
Brian, let me go back to you. You said things are going to come out. What things?
Well, like I said, the servers...
The above quote is from the live interview with Trasher and is intended to show you what he said about the servers. As for his comments regarding the globalists and them mobilizing the leftists to make trouble all over America when Trump actually declares victory is his own opinion. In the afternoon of November 19th, Trump's legal team held a press conference at Capitol Hill. During the Q&A at the conference, a reporter asked Trump's attorney, Sidney Powell, this specific question.
There's reports that there was a piece of hardware, probably a server picked up in Germany. Is that true, and is it related to this?
That is true. It is somehow related to this, but I do not know whether good guys got it or bad guys got it.
We don't know who picked it up.
Now, Attorney Powell claimed that she didn't know who took the servers in Germany and whether it was the good guys or the bad guys. But Trasher, a member of the Trump recount committee, said that they have obtained some of the raw data from the servers and that it had been restored and would be made public. Putting these two statements together creates some confusion. Powell is a reputable American lawyer who would never lie and make things up at a press conference like this on behalf of Trump's team. Trasher, on the other hand, is a member of Trump's recount committee and is briefing the American public in the news media and is unlikely to say anything without solid evidence. But at least one thing can now be further confirmed. The seizure of servers in Germany did happen. It was first reported on our program on November 13, just after Congressman Gomer leaked the story to the public. On Monday, November 9th, U.S. Media Veterans Today published an article online by former British lawyer Michael Shrimpton. The article was titled, "It Was a Steal." In the first paragraph of the article, he said, "This column is slightly later than planned because of my behind-the-scenes role over the weekend, which included alerting the White House on Saturday night to the existence of a dossier which came in from the Paris 2 MI6 headquarters at Vauxhall Cross on Friday evening, confirming massive fraud. I believe it identifies B at CIA as the coordinator of the Black CIA operation."
Now notice, he said that this operation was going on around November 9th to November 12th, and that the information about the server was leaked on November 13th. So it's so interesting that during that exact time, all of these big social media companies were having these massive outages, and they had problems that they were fixing. I'm sure their fixers were hard at work indeed. But yeah, it caused massive outages. This right here is Reuters on November 11th, talking about 250,000 users being out. I remember mine went down, and for a couple of days it was up, but only parts of the system worked and things like that. Now keep this in mind here in a minute when I show you the congressional hearings, because at the same time that all of this is going on with Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani and everything on this front, on another front, the Department of Justice has filed a lawsuit against these big tech companies. And I want to show you some footage from those hearings. Also keep this in mind when I show you a clip from Dana Coverstone here in a minute. Now you guys know in this video on the screen, the battle for Dominion, election glitches, and the Great Reset. In that video, I showed you guys the evidence of this massive DDoS attack. It was going, I said in the video, the white hats are launching algorithms all over the world, and the big tech companies are launching algorithms trying to combat, trying to pull the evidence. But just in case you didn't watch this 3-hour-long Battle for Dominion Great Reset video I did, I'll just put 2 minutes of that right here so you know what I'm talking about.
Says fixing error on the platform. Well, it was actually really crazy what happened yesterday. What appeared to be a massive DDoS attack on the entire world. This is a website that tracks people having problems accessing websites, and you can see that YouTube, YouTube TV, YouTube Music, Google, Comcast, Google Play, Verizon, many other big websites like Netflix and Twitter, all of them were being attacked by this DDoSing. And I actually have a clip where I recorded the attack, and I'll let it play now. Are you watching this, folks? This is real-time evidence of a massive DDoS attack on the entire internet. I have never seen anything like this. We are witnessing an attack on a grand scale. This is absolute chaos. YouTube is down, websites are down, Verizon is down, Netflix is down, all these websites are going down. Look at the number of attacks, folks. We're over 270. I cannot even follow this, and it's coming from all over the world.
I refuse to go along with this, and I'm seeing through all of your lies, wicked, wicked devil.
Now hang in there. All of this information ties into the infrastructure, the rollout of this Dark Winter project. And I'm sure a handful of you are resisting the urge to just complain and leave nasty comments and stuff because you're getting tired of the politics, but there's absolutely no way to separate what we're seeing go on politically from the bigger picture. I'm not going to censor entire portions of our reality because you want some sort of partial truth. When we talked about the boys from Brazil, and we talked about what was going on in Argentina, and we talked about what was going on in Antarctica, and we talked about all these same movements before this election happened, nobody had a complaint in the world about it. But because now it ties in through Argentina and Brazil and Venezuela and Cuba, and all of it ties into this election, now all of a sudden people are like, oh, so why are you talking about politics so much? But they never complained before, because they have been programmed by the mainstream and by the shills who have infiltrated the truth community that we're not supposed to talk about this, that, oh, you're stupid if you talk about this, you just don't get it. And that's precisely why I'm talking about it, is because they're all trying so hard to make us not talk about it. But anyway, Dana Coverstone, this is where this comes in. This Dana Coverstone vision, it's called the data dream, and he had no idea what it meant. This was over a month ago, the middle of October. I think he posted it, yeah, right here, October 20th. So this is weeks before the election that he had this, and a month before the data storm that I just showed you. So I want to play you the clip and see if you can see the similarities. I think in hindsight, it sure does sound a lot like what we're going through right now with this data manipulation and these big data companies, and them getting busted and trying to hide and destroy the evidence. And if you listen to what Dana says, he says that the tentacles, he watches them go all the way through the system, and they're trying to save the system. They're trying to stop the fall of Babylon is what they're trying to do. And they're going city by city and hide what was going on. And there are data points that blew up. And talks about watching this data go up through Philadelphia, and it was so fast and furious that it came up like a fire hose and it blew up under Philadelphia. And that's what they're saying happened, about why the vote counting stopped, and they had to have these Dominion tech guys come in and do updates to the system. That it was, they didn't realize that they would have to be changing millions of votes without getting caught. So it overwhelmed the system, and it started being visible. People were catching it on the screen, like chunks of 100,000 votes or 50,000 votes switching right before their eyes, even, you know, on the broadcasts on the news.
According to a Twitter post from a data scientist, Michigan counted almost 150,000 votes within 5 seconds, and less than 6,000 of them were for Trump. And Virginia's vote count was reduced by over 100,000 votes in the early hours of the morning. The data scientist also told us she found Wisconsin had an average count of 325 votes per second, while Washington hit a peak of over 130,000 vote counts per second. And in one video, what looks to be CNN's 2020 election coverage showed 20,000 votes in Pennsylvania being transferred from Trump to Biden.
So they sent in their fixers, and, you know, the rest is history. They've been fighting ever since. And you can see, try to post anything about election fraud and you'll see these same androids, I mean, tech CEOs, they'll take it down. Like, they won't allow you to even speak or share information on the subject. And of course, the same exact thing is happening in the mainstream. They are fighting, they are desperate, they're fighting with everything they can to shut down the flow of information, and they can't stop us. It's spreading like wildfire.
Last night I had the completeness of a dream that I've had over the last several days. It started about the 17th or 18th of October. Once again, I'm not going to try to interpret what these dreams are. I'm just telling you what I had. I felt the urgency to get them out this morning. So here's what it is. I saw what looked like an atlas with an interstate lines all over the nation. Like if you're looking down at an atlas and you see the interstate lines going all over from state to state, and they were flashing with bits of information going all over. It looked like a data map. It appeared to be like a network of sorts that was obviously overworked, and some of the data points were not flashing. Some were the places, cities, smaller places. You had flashing, you had things that were moving, you had data points that were moving almost like traffic. But I could see there were small workers in white lab coats, and they were trying to work on the areas where the data was not flashing. I saw hammers, I saw guys with laptops, I saw people who were trying to work out the minute details of why this point wasn't flashing or why this point was flashing too hard or too fast. And I could see the areas heating up. I heard concerns that the circuits were going to go hot. That's what they said. Those circuits are going to go hot, and if they go hot, they will fry. And so that was the language I was hearing. And I said they're going to go hot and get fried if they could not slow the system down. And suddenly from the West Coast to the Midwest, and it started Washington State, Oregon, California, there were these big flashes. And then I saw smoke from the data points that seemed to represent those bigger cities. And they stopped on the western side of the Mississippi. So it started all the way on the West Coast, went to the West Coast, or to the western edge of the Mississippi River. I was not seeing explosions. I was not seeing bombs. I was seeing like systems shutting down because they were so hot. And as the data points, the flashing got closer to the bigger place, the bigger cities, it got faster and faster and faster. And almost in the background in my dream, I could hear that like a warning sign that happens in a laboratory or something like that. And the lab coat guys, they were working feverishly to fix these, but they couldn't get the system back online. So instead, they were trying to I could hear them saying, reroute that system, go around this city, I heard them say several times, go around Reno, go around Reno, go around Reno, get through Vegas, go here, go there. And they were trying to reroute the system to bring whatever the system was back to life. But as they were doing it and rerouting it, the bigger cities were still sending up smoke clouds. It was like you would see in the old Western movies where the cloud, like someone had like a Native American Indian with a blanket or something going over it. It was almost like the data points were sending up information about what had happened there. I did not see Native American Indians. I did not see anything like that or people doing the smoke cloud. But it looked as if there was something interrupting the smoke as it was coming up, almost like it was sending out a signal of information. And then there was a countdown clock. There was no countdown clock at first, but now on the other side of the Mississippi River, there was a countdown clock, and it was counting down 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And when it reached 1, the eastern side of the Midwest started having the same flash points, and the cities there began to smoke, and the circuits were fried. And I could hear those guys yelling, the system's going up, it's going up, it's going up. And then they would scream, it's going down, it's going down, it's going down. Circuits are going to fry, the circuits are going to fry, and then there would be these flash points, and you would see the smoke. But when the flashes reached Philadelphia, and this was specifically the city that I saw where all this was happening, was Philadelphia, the network line that was red, it was like it looked like a fire hose that was pulsating with like LED lights inside of it. But when it got to Philadelphia, the network line was red, flashing, went into where the Liberty Bell was sitting. It went underneath the Liberty Bell. And when the pressure began to build up, and it was like watching water in a fire hose, it just filled it up, filled it up, filled it up, came underneath the Liberty Bell. And when it got underneath the Liberty Bell, it blew up, and the Liberty Bell went flying straight up in the air. And it split in half. The bell split in the middle of the air. It threw the Liberty Bell up into the air like this, and then the Liberty Bell split in half, and it fell in such a way that the round area landed on the ground, and it was rotating. It was like going back and forth, just wobbling back and forth. It didn't land on the flat edge of the bell. It had been cracked in half. Once again, and the crack was where it had split through the whole thing. So the crack became what split the whole thing in half. It stopped rocking after what seemed like in the dream, several minutes of just rocking back and forth like this. And then the Liberty Bell began to melt. It was almost as if a huge heat source, or from the data point that fire hose was so hot that it was melting now. So the Liberty Bell began to melt, and like heat was being applied. And then I saw that the lines of data were all headed towards Washington, D.C. from there. And it looked like the city had these octopus arms, and they were trying to fight to disconnect the data lines. And what I assumed was they were trying to keep the explosive power of the system shutting down from hitting Washington, D.C. And so these octopus arms came out, and they were trying to disconnect the systems. And then, but there was one that just kept flashing, kept building up pulses. It seemed bigger and more extreme, carrying more data, more information than the other lines I'd seen in the interstate area before. Though there were people wearing suits and ties, this was business attire. I saw justice. It was not necessarily Supreme Court justice. I did not see faces, but I saw judges. I saw people in suit and tie, business attire, professional business, and they were trying to basically pull this line out of Washington, D.C. to keep it from blowing up or whatever. They were trying to pull this line away from the city without avail, to no avail. This thing kept going. It finally blew up because all the connections went to the Capitol building. That's exactly where it was going, to the Capitol building. It finally blew up, and the building literally cracked in half. So I'd seen the Liberty Bell crack in half, and now I saw the Capitol building crack in half. And it issues this huge smoke cloud. And as the smoke goes into the air, it creates a word. And that word was discovery. Discovery was the word that was in the air. So you got the halls of Congress cracked in half. You've got the smoke just billowing up, and it's spelling this word out in the sky, which is the word discovery. It's not like smoke that's dissipating or clouds. It stays there in the sky. And there are people that they're running now. And they're not running from the explosion. They're running from the word they see in the sky, which was discovery.
So I think it's pretty clear. I don't think you have to be really super gifted in dream interpretation to see that those tentacles running into Washington that they were desperately trying to protect are this Biden presidency. Because you can see those data companies putting it on all of our videos. Is it not on every video that you watch? If you want to talk about this election fraud, right below it, it'll say U.S. elections. The AP has called the presidential race for Joe Biden. See more on Google. Google says, stop the investigation. Google says, stop the investigation. Do not watch this video. The media has called the race for Biden. It's like, but the states haven't certified their election results yet. But no, not a single electoral college vote has been cast. Stop the investigation. Why are you watching this video? Right here. The AP, the media has called the election for Joe Biden. See more on Google. It's like, calm down, you guys. Simmer down now. And they've started stacking them. I posted one of these videos about the server in Germany on my Facebook, on my personal Facebook page. And they loaded it up with like 6 articles and videos contradicting that, saying that no, Joe Biden is president. Stop saying this. But here they'll always put 2. So then they'll put robust safeguards help ensure the integrity of elections and results. Learn more here about you should never question elections, coming from these same people who have done tons of exposés after they said that Russian bots swung the election for Donald Trump. It's like so ridiculous. Now these same people are saying, no, you should never question the integrity of our elections and their results. So I think the use of that exact language, that the cities were being blown up by this data discovery, is so interesting, because that's the exact same language that Sidney Powell has been using in some of her interviews.
Whatever I saw with the data points, there are explosive things that are happening. That was not cities blowing up. That was information. That was data points. That was systems that were crashing.
Let me ask you about the state of Georgia. Obviously, yesterday, the governor there, he certified the election for Joe Biden. It's about 12,000 votes. And what you see, will Georgia switch?
Yeah, that's a total farce. Georgia's probably going to be the first state I'm going to blow up, and Mr. Kemp and the Secretary of State need to go with it, because they're in on the Dominion scam with their last-minute purchase or award of a contract to Dominion of $100 million.
Jordan Sekelo said that there's going to be a filing soon in Georgia that would be explosive. Can you tell us anything? Can you make some news with us here tonight? Tell us anything new that you're going to present in that filing in Georgia.
Sidney, what's...
And it will be biblical.
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 Then the scene changed, and I saw a rotunda of the Capitol, and there was a closed casket in the middle of the rotunda. And the sign on the casket stated that inside was the Democratic candidate for the office of president. And there was a calendar hanging above that casket, and it had the date specifically. Clearly, I saw it. One of the first times I've seen an actual date, not on a calendar, but on the paper, it said December 17th. That date was clearly spelled out. And I'm not going to say someone's going to die on the 17th. I don't know what to say about it. I'm just telling you what I saw. That's all I'm doing.
I think that's probably symbolic, because most of Dana Coverstone's dreams, prophetic glimpses, are symbolic instead of just literal. So if you look at the post-election dates, that date would line up, because December 23rd, certificates of electoral vote results must be delivered by the 4th Wednesday in December to the following state and federal officials: the President of the Senate, who is Vice President Mike Pence, the Secretary of State of the state where the electors met, the Archivist of the United States, and the Federal District Court Judge of the district where the electors met. Now, so if you subtract 6 days from that, that would be December 17th. So what does the law say about 6 days before December 23rd? Federal law says states have until 6 days before members of the Electoral College gather in person to certify election results and determine their electors, a date known as the safe harbor deadline. So that December 17th date more falls in line with the safe harbor deadline. So again, I think that this is symbolic about the end of a candidacy, the end of the Democrat candidate, which is what the sign said. So I don't think it's literal. I mean, of course, it could be, given Biden's age and his deteriorating mental health and stuff. We really don't know what he's dealing with. You know, and I pray not. I pray for these people. We want their souls to be saved. A lot of these people grew up in these families, in these SRA and MK Ultra families, and they've had horrific lives. And, you know, they are what they are, but we still pray for them. I don't have hate in my heart for any of these people. And I know that's really hard to maintain that perspective, the lens of Christ, to see the world through the eyes of Christ. But you have to remember what he said. He was crucified by the synagogue of Satan. But he understood why these humans did these things to him, because their ancestral gods, the pagan gods, they were demons. They were fallen angels. I mean, you see what these humans were raised in and raised by and convinced was normal. Humanity was enslaved by these higher life forms, and they taught us their demonic ways, and Jesus came to save us from that. So he didn't see us as the enemy. He had great pity on us because he knows how we got this way. And what did he say? He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. All of us are being enslaved by entities way higher up on the pyramid than humans. That's why they fight so hard to teach us not to believe in God or supreme beings. They don't even want us to know that interdimensional beings exist. But these entities, the real top of the evil empire, they're trying to enslave all humans, even the people in these Illuminati families, in these mafia families, in these Illuminati bloodlines. And honestly, as much as we hate being enslaved and losing our freedom down here in the common man, I think that the people who were raised in those families and those MK Ultra programs and that SRA abuse, I think they had it worse than we've had it. And I really feel sorry for them. And I hope that some of them can get free. And as you know, I believe that many of them have, and that they're actually working on our side now, on the side of Jesus Christ, in the body of Christ, in fact. But as always, the point is, our battle is not against flesh and blood, and I implore all of you to not have hate in your heart toward these people, because many of them have had lives that you would not have wanted to live. And yeah, they may have turned out kind of gropey and sniffy and horrible humans, but you don't know what they went through when they were children. Never forget, while we navigate through these times, these troubled times, what our job here is, what our mission is. And that is to love and to try to win these souls to Christ. It's imperative that we keep that perspective, the Spirit of God, that we continue to serve the Spirit of God, and God is love. Because that's probably our biggest battle. Love your enemy is probably the biggest battle that we will ever face as souls. But God is clear. Matthew 5, starting at verse 43. You have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. And I know that's hard, very hard. And as I go through this video and talk about the dark winter and the dangers that we are actually in, the things these people really have planned for us, for my son, taking away my child's future, and maybe even trying to haul his mom off the way they hauled off that little pregnant mother in Australia just for posting on Facebook. The things they have planned, I get it. This is the hardest battle that we have to fight, and that is to remain in love and remember the mission. Remember who we serve. We serve Jesus Christ, and our mission is to wake these souls up and to pull them out of the grasp of the enemy. These little Antifa kids on the streets doing that, these are our children. That they have captured their minds with mind control and propaganda and re-education camps and horrible things. Our goal is not to hurt those children, but to save those children, to wake them up and pull them out of that cult. And no matter how far you go up the ladder, that is still our mission. No matter what positions of power these people are in, they can still be saved and changed, and God will make them a new creation in Christ. And like I said, as you guys know from my past videos, I believe that has happened to some of the people in these families. Now, whether that'll happen to Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or those, I don't know. But I just want to make it clear right here that Pastor Dana Coverstone he was in no way wishing harm on Joe Biden or anything. He was just telling exactly what he was shown by the Lord in his prophetic vision. And I believe it's symbolic because it also goes along with his whole series that he has been shown by the Lord. In that second series of visions I showed in past videos, how he said Kamala Harris was riding in on that wagon to blow up the democracy, but Joe Biden was like unaware he was riding the donkeys in the front that were pulling the wagon. And at the end of that, he ended up on the smoldering pile. Even the donkeys, the entire party ended up on the smoldering pile, and their whole plan blew up in their face, essentially. It was a trap set that ensnared them themselves. It also goes along with his vision of seeing the finger circle November 3rd, but then it was reversed. It started going in reverse. And later on in this vision about the date and the Democrat candidate being done, he talks about all of the politicians there at the funeral, per se, that they all had their shoes off. All of their shoes were off in a pile. And that means, that symbolizes two things. In dream interpretation, having your shoes off means being exposed or having your reputation ruined. In biblical terms, it means that you did not have on the gospel of peace, that you are not walking in peace. And we know, yes, not only do they have a dark winter planned and are open about it, but they have historically been the party that has banned the Bible, banned the 10 Commandments, banned prayer from schools, all of it to remove God from our culture. And a lot of people have mentioned the leopard print. And, I usually say sometimes clothes are just clothes. I see that a lot in the truth community. That, we don't want to veer into paranoia, but yes, they absolutely do use symbolism. And with all of these symbols, there are symbols that God uses for good, and then they use them for wickedness. Like the rainbow, God specifically gave us the rainbow as a beautiful symbol of a covenant between we, humanity, and God. But instead, they take it and use it for sexual perversion and pride. The same way with butterflies. God made butterflies. Butterflies are beautiful. Nature is beautiful. I'm not going to let Satan teach me to hate everything beautiful just because he corrupts everything. That's what he's done to those trapped in the left-hand path. Look at the clips that I show in all these videos, like those young leftist liberal kids who see something like a pro-life sign. They see Christians fighting for beautiful little babies, and they're like, I effing hate you. To them, it's a symbol of something ugly. Well, I'm not gonna see the world through that lens. I don't care what the devil says or does. I sprinkle wildflower seeds all out around the woods so that the butterflies will come in and I can see the beauty of heaven, at least have some beauty on this earth. But they take it right, and it's Project Monarch. It's a terrible thing. So now we can't enjoy rainbows, we can't enjoy butterflies, like everything. But no, these are things of God, and I will enjoy them. I still have on my fridge little rainbow pictures that my son drew in kindergarten for me. This, I love you, Mommy. I'm going to see them in the light that they were intended. I'm not going to say, I can't put that on my refrigerator because everybody will think I'm a homosexual. That's ridiculous. We need to be, reasonable. So when it comes to a leopard print, especially in women power positions, that's a known fashion trend. So attorneys and CEOs, women in power positions, wear leopard print, and they are sending a message. Leopard print signifies more than anything a certain knowingness and the wearer's confidence. So is Sidney sending a message? I'm sure she has an entire wardrobe of these power suits that she wears in her legal battles. A leopard print is also a fashion statement of power and defiance. And it's called a fashion statement for a reason. People who wear it, especially in like legal battles and business meetings, they are making a statement, a fashion statement. So it's up to you to decide, is she just a powerful attorney, or is she on the inside of one of these? Because we know that it is also an Illuminati symbol. Or maybe she does come from these families like I've talked about, and she is in the know and she's making an open statement to them. Like here, leopard print history from pharaohs to Beyonce. The leopard print meant power. So is she showing defiance and power to them, saying, we will not be intimidated, we will not back down, we know who you are? Now I'm going to be defiant against this establishment? You know, who knows? It's anybody's guess. But I just wanted to point out again, like I've done in past videos, that these symbols, it's not black and white. There can be many interpretations of what we see around us. And most of these symbols that they have hijacked and are using for perverse things, that also can be interpreted through God's eyes. He says he uses the leopard as a symbol to destroy the enemies of God. Again and again, it's a symbol of stealth and power and speed. And here's just one verse, Hosea 13:7. And he's talking about God's anger against the corrupt leaders. When they had pasture, they became satisfied. When they were satisfied, their hearts became proud. And as a result, they forgot me. So like a lion, I will pounce on them. Like a leopard, I will lurk by their path. I will devour them like a wild beast would tear them apart. So God himself uses that symbol of a leopard to say, this is how I will ambush them. I will pounce on them and tear them apart like a leopard. So maybe that's the symbolism. She keeps saying in her interviews, this is biblical, this is biblical. Okay, before we get back to the dark winter, I want to touch on one more thing that has come up in comment section, and that is about celebrating the holidays. Again, we have this huge segment of the truth community who have become zealots about the holidays, the pagan holidays. And so they're attacking, they've become heretic hunters, they think. And so they're out there attacking everybody in the body of Christ about celebrating the holidays, because we know that many of these are pagan. So with Thanksgiving coming up and me mentioning it, I've been getting a lot of comments. Oh, I thought you were a real Christian, but if you celebrate Thanksgiving, you know, that sort of stuff. So, and to me, it's a no-brainer. I can see somebody who comes at me with that spirit. You're never going to convince me that you're speaking from the Holy Spirit, because I know what the Holy Spirit looks like. He looks like Jesus Christ. So think of Jesus Christ hanging on the cross, being, you know, literally his muscles ripped to shreds like a hamburger, you know, just tortured. They pulled out chunks of his hair. They did, you know, everything imaginable to Jesus Christ. And he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That's the Holy Spirit. So if you're coming at me over something as silly as I want to give thanks to God on any day of the year, but especially on these holidays, these pagan holidays where they are launching an assault spiritually, they're in spiritual warfare, and you're trying to tell me not to get together with my family and worship and praise God on those days as a means of fighting back in spiritual warfare. And you're going to come at me from that nasty spirit saying, oh, if you're a real Christian, and you think that's going to work on me, that I'm going to go, oh, well, you're so much holier than me. Thank you for schooling me on that. You know, no, I can see that spirit. I've battled that spirit that's speaking through you my whole life. So I know him well. The Holy Spirit does not talk to me that way. So, you know, I would ask you to evaluate your spirit, because the word Satan literally translates accuser of the brethren. And it says in the book of Revelation that God will cast him down, that ancient spirit that has stood before the throne of God day and night, accusing the brethren, like he did to Job. Oh, well, he's just worshiping you because of this. Oh, well, they're doing that. Well, look at what they're doing. His literal definition, his name, means accuser of the brethren. So if that's the spirit that you're serving and you think that you're doing God a service, you know, I would just ask you to take every thought captive, like the Bible says, test the spirits. But for those people who really struggle with this issue, who have family members and small children and stuff like that, and they've been put under condemnation by other members of the body of Christ or members in the truth community, you know, I want to reassure you and give you another perspective. Here's the perfect example. I put this video up in November of 2018. This was back when those witches called that hexing of Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh and Donald Trump and other members of Congress. And they were all over the mainstream news. Of course, they get, if I wanted to call a gathering to harm somebody, oh, it would be, you know, I'd be deleted from every platform imaginable. But these guys, they get to go on the mainstream news with millions of viewers and announce this ceremony that they're having and invite everybody to come join them to curse Justice Kavanaugh. And if you think this is, oh, these are just playful, it doesn't mean anything, this isn't real spiritual warfare. Well, here's a clip of what they're saying, calling for his wife to be a widow and his children to be fatherless. Here's a clip from this actual satanic ceremony that they held. And you can see again with the androgyny, he's got the ball cap on, it says boy on one side and girl on the other. It's all linked, it's all the same agendas, like the trans agenda video I did, and like what we just talked about J. Edgar Hoover getting caught doing behind closed doors. It's all the same, it's all true. But anyway, here's about 30 seconds or so of their cursing ceremony.
Let him be condemned. Let his days be few. Let his children be fatherless, and his wife a widow. Let there be none to extend mercy unto him, neither let there be any to favor his fatherless children.
So the question is, what did I do the day that they all gathered together to launch these curses and hexes and summon evil spirits to call down harm on individuals? What did I do? Did I say, oh, this is their day? This is their day. The pagans are all getting together to summon up a bunch of evil. This is their day. Everybody stay home and do nothing. No, I put up a video and I said, everybody get together and pray. Every single attack that they launch, we're going to bind it and pull it down in Jesus Christ's name. Every single spirit they summon up, we're going to bind it and cast it down in Jesus Christ's name. We're going to raise up a standard against this. That's what I did. That's what I always do when the pagans have their high holy days. On Halloween, I'm praying. I'm passing out Bibles. No, I don't sit home and go, I'm going to do nothing. This is the devil's day. No, you know what? He doesn't get a day. The devil doesn't get a day. He gets no days. Why would you give ground to the devil? We're here to take ground back from the devil. Last year, before the quarantine, we went and set up a street preaching thing. There's a huge block party where I live, where 5 or 6 towns come together and they block off several blocks. And, you know, all the families and kids go around in this big loop and get candy. Well, I dressed up as an angel with big feathery white wings, and I passed out little bags of candy with Bibles, with little children's Bibles in every one of them. We handed out literally over 1,000 Bibles. Probably, well, I can't remember what it was. It might have been close to 2,000 Bibles that night. I didn't stay home and go, oh, we're going to give this one to the devil. No, we went out there and took it back for Jesus Christ. Every one of those families went home with a Bible in their hand. Some of those families went home with multiple Bibles. And to the parents, we passed out the hashtag Jesus cards. The tracts, the gospel tracts, cards that had John 3:16 on it and a Snicker bar stapled to it. You know, we got the gospel into the hands of thousands and thousands of people that night. That's how I handle the holidays. I don't say, oh gosh, did you dress up like an angel? If you put on a costume, you're just glorifying the devil. My ass, I was glorifying the devil. I was out there taking back ground for Jesus Christ. And that's what I'm going to be doing on Thanksgiving. If you believe that just because they're going to be launching their spiritual warfare on Thanksgiving, if you think it's a good idea not to get together with your family and give thanks to God on Thanksgiving, then you're missing it. That's exactly the time that you should be getting together with your family and praising God and lifting up a standard in spiritual warfare against what they are doing. And I see it that way on every single one of these pagan holidays. We've already done this. We already took this ground back. That's the sad thing. We already took this ground for Jesus Christ. We took their pagan holidays and the body of Christ started celebrating it. You know what we're going to do? We're going to celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. While you guys are doing your pagan garbage, we're going to be celebrating salvation entering this world, the birth of the Lord Jesus Christ. You know, every single holiday. On Easter, yeah, you guys are going to be doing your pagan fertility things, and we're going to be celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ. We're going to be praising God and thanking God for intervening in this sick sewer of a world and sending us a Savior. So we already took this ground back. But now it's the same with everything. The way they convince us not to vote while they're telling all their people to get out and vote. The way they teach us not to engage in politics, although that's one of their control mechanisms over the entire body of humanity. They're highly engaged in politics. But, oh, if you think it's just all Hegelian, you know, they convince us not to fight back at all. And they've done that on these holidays. Yes, I get it. I get it. I know where they come from. I know all about it. Most of you know that I've done countless hours of presentations about this artificial matrix, this thing that has been laid on top of us, on top of God's nature, you know, from programmable matter and these gas giants, right? The governing bodies, as they say, above us, and their worship of these governing bodies and these seasons and the solstices. I get where it all comes from, but that's why we fight back, just like with the Kavanaugh thing. Just like with the Halloween thing, these are precisely the times that we need to raise up a standard against them. And what better way than to praise God on those days? And if you can't tell the difference, you're going to come at me and tell me that I can't praise my God on any certain day? No, the devil doesn't get a day. Not in my life. No way. Now, are you going to celebrate those holidays with the pagan rituals? Yeah. If you're tying people to Yule logs and sacrificing them, yeah, clearly, okay, you're celebrating the pagan holidays. But if you're sitting around a table holding hands with your family, praying and thanking God for all the blessings in your life, that is not celebrating anything pagan. Just because they've claimed that day for themselves. Well, you know what? I claim it for Jesus Christ. I'm taking that ground back. If you want to surrender that ground in your life, that's on you. But I'm taking this world back for Jesus Christ. I'm redeeming the days. So yes, of course, if you find yourself sacrificing people on Yule logs or doing these pagan invocations to call up Odin or something, yeah, you might be misguided. You pretty much got led astray into celebrating the pagan rituals. But if you're praising God and you're holding hands with your family and you're praying and you're thanking God for his blessings, no, you don't have to apologize to anybody. In fact, I highly recommend it. Any day that they are launching spiritual warfare is a day that we need to be coming at them twice as hard. So that's my take on it. Now I've gotten that out of the way. Hopefully it sets some people free from condemnation, and hopefully it will get some freaking prayer warriors out there doing their job on these pagan holidays instead of hiding in the corner in condemnation, thinking that we just give these days over to the enemy. No. No days. The devil gets no days. Every day belongs to Jesus Christ. This is a day the Lord has made, and I will rejoice in it. And I encourage you to do the same. Okay, moving on from answering comments back to the dark winter and event 201, the first wave and the second wave. So the one thing that they have in common, well, I mean, they have lots of things in common. Both of these simulations are based on biowarfare or the release of a virus. But the thing I want to start with is noticing that in all of these drills and simulations, they always involve the mainstream media and the social media. So like here, involve the key players in this, the dark winter, were the New York Times, the BBC, CBS, NBC, and that's why I reiterated so much in the beginning of this video the role that social media censorship has played and the mainstream media pushing this narrative. Regardless of facts, they are on point, on the script, pushing a particular narrative. That's not organic. It's not political even. It has to do with this infrastructure. and they have been involved in these drills. They have been told what to do when this moment came. So to save time, I'm just going to show you a clip from this deleted video where I juxtaposed the two. I showed the simulation of what they expected out of the media when this moment came, and then I showed you the actual media right by the simulation side by side, and it's amazing. It's the exact same script. Here is a clip from Event 201.
Okay, thank you for reconvening, and let's get an update from Dr. Rivers.
In the last 3 weeks, case numbers have continued to grow exponentially. We now have an estimated 4.2 million cases and 240,000 deaths.
Where have I heard that exact number before? Was it in the little simulation or was it in the big one? Oh yeah, it was in both. I'm sure you all remember Dr. Birx up there with Dr. Fauci and this graph with the 240,000 deaths. And here is the Event 201 fake news broadcast talking about how they need to censor all of us on social media. That according to their models in their simulation of a pandemic, it is of the utmost importance to silence dissent. They discussed in Event 201 all of the options from social media censorship all the way through to a nationwide shutdown of communications and the internet, so that people who were starting to uprise and rebel against the official narrative and the expert recommendations, that to quell that, even if it took shutting off the entire internet to stop people from organizing, then that would be something that would be a necessity. These are the things they discussed in their simulation. So anyway, let's take a look at their simulation of a fake news broadcast during a coronavirus pandemic and juxtapose it against our quote-unquote real news broadcasts during a coronavirus pandemic.
We have called this meeting today because of major strategic problems around communication that are happening globally. And here's a media debate that just happened on air today.
Alarming news emerging from social media companies today about the CAPS pandemic. Twitter and Facebook are reporting they've identified and deleted a disturbing number of accounts dedicated to spreading disinformation about the outbreak. For more on this, we go to our correspondent, Catalina Parks.
We know social media companies are working around the clock to combat these disinformation campaigns. The task of identifying every bad actor is immense. And experts agree that new disinformation campaigns are being generated every day. This is a huge problem that's going to keep us from ending the pandemic and might even lead to the fall of governments, as we saw in the Arab Spring. If the solution means controlling and reducing access to information, I think it's the right choice.
How do you deal with the fact that Facebook is now being used to organize a lot of these protests to defy social distancing, defy the social distancing guidelines in states? Is somebody trying to organize something like that, does that qualify as harmful information?
We do classify that as harmful misinformation, and we take that down.
Another thing I talked about mainly in this video, and it is still over on my website if you look for this thumbnail, even though they took it down off of my YouTube channel here, but I talked about this particular company in detail called Serco, S-E-R-C-O, and they do international simulations. It's the next step up from these tabletop simulations like Event 201 and Operation Dark Winter. They do sort of live real-time drills. Now that's extremely interesting because a lot of you already know that they're just coincidence of all coincidences, right? Happen to be drills going on the morning of 9/11. There happen to be drills going on the day of the Boston bombing. So as we've all discovered, the line has been very blurred between reality and this actor-based reality that's laid over the top of us. But this is the next little clip, and the next coincidence that I want to show you is that that same company, Serco, also in its big mega conglomerate, contains this UK prison firm, a private prison company, a private for-profit company that manages imprisonment and specializes in these in house arrest and electronic ankle bracelets. I know you can't make this stuff up. And of course, just a couple of months before Event 201, Bill Gates just happened to buy 3.74 million shares of this prison company. And of course, what was one of the first things these liberal leftist judges started doing? I mean, this was right off the bat. I mean, this was the end of March, beginning of April. COVID-19 Kentucky update. Judges order ankle monitor for coronavirus patients refusing quarantine. We weren't even 30 days into figuring this thing out, and they were already ordering ankle monitors. And I made a video on the quarantine hotels that were popping up as soon as the one 9 miles from my house popped up. One town over. But we'll get full blown into the FEMA camps and the roundups and all of that in just a second. There's a little bit of gray area overlap between this social media, their role in all of this, and the rounding up of citizens. So let's cover that first. This is where we cross over from first wave infrastructure, which was stuff covered in Event 201, into second wave infrastructure, which is Operation Dark Winter. And as you can see, Facebook and these social media companies are already playing a larger role than just controlling the narrative and silencing dissent through censorship. Now we have people being arrested for posting on Facebook.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Right. Now, you're under arrest in relation to incitement.
Incitement?
What's that? Now,
what on earth? Excuse me, what on earth?
just put your phone down.
Can you
It's in relation
record
to-
this? I'm in my pajamas.
What's
I had
this?
an ultrasound in an hour because
Yeah,
I'm
she's pregnant, so take it easy. It's in relation to a Facebook post, in relation to a lockdown protest you put on for Saturday.
Yeah, and I wasn't breaking any laws by doing
You
that.
are actually, you are breaking the law. That's why I'm arresting you.
Now, this is the really sad part. It's the same sorrow that I feel when I look around me here and see the demoralized, degraded people wearing their muzzles and just doing as they're told, and just, almost apologetic for, well, not even apologetic anymore, more into the snitch network, more looking suspiciously at anybody who won't comply with the government. But, yeah, you look at her after she was released from her interrogation, and I can you imagine the fear of that your children would grow up motherless when you realize that you live in a Nazi regime, when they will come haul dissenters away, just like Hitler did to the camps. They will literally come to your home just because you posted something on Facebook, just because you shared a post about a lockdown protest. Australia is a few steps ahead of the United States, but yes, Facebook does the same thing here in the United States as far as right here. Citing disobedience of government orders, Facebook deletes an event for an anti-lockdown protest in Michigan, a Facebook group with over 380,000 people, citing disobedience of government orders. And if I'm not mistaken, Facebook also deleted the Stop the Steal page, didn't they? But yeah, so Australia is a little bit ahead of the United States, but you can see where these technocrats, I'm going to show the congressional hearings here in a minute and how this leads into the dark winter. But Australia is the perfect example that they're a few steps ahead of us toward this dark winter. And yes, Facebook will be part, and the social media in general will be used in the roundup of political dissidents. This is happening. And this right here, this coming dark winter, is exactly why I fight so hard and am willing to throw my support behind these battles for Donald Trump. Because with one candidate, Joseph Biden, there is no hope. I am this girl. I am this mother. I post tons of this stuff against the government and against the technocracy online. I'm already on the list. If Biden takes the reins and there is no more resistance, I'm done. This isn't a game to me at all. You can see over here, even on my backup channel, this is my backup channel, which has been under the radar for a long time. Now I have a warning for hate crimes on my backup channel. And I've shown you in the last 2 full-length videos that I put up just in the last week or so, that these Facebook executives, these tech company executives are actually in Joe Biden's transition team. If they're able to fraudulently pull off this coup d'etat, then I'm done for because of my fight for Jesus Christ. So, pardon me that I might get a little fiery to some of you people who are like, we're just not going to get involved. Like, for those of us out here on the front lines who have put ourselves out here, all right, if you don't get it by now, then this just isn't the channel for you. But for those of us who see the dark winter coming and can hear them with our own ears on our heads, can hear them say that the dark winter's coming, this is important. And with the Joseph Biden candidate, there is absolutely no hope. And with the Donald Trump candidate, at least there's a glimmer of hope that patriots, there might be a group of patriots that will be on our side, that will stand with us in resistance as we move through these troubled times with General Flynn and Woolsey and these people that the mainstream media keep exposing. Oh, they're all working together. Well, I sure as hell hope so. Yeah, we don't know. We'll see. Keep praying. Keep praying for these people. Maybe Sidney Powell won't be able to stop this. But I know for a fact Mark Zuckerberg isn't going to stop this. I know for a fact Kamala Harris isn't going to stop this. I know for a fact Jack isn't going to stop this. I know for a fact Communist Russia and Communist China aren't going to save us. And this is exactly what God showed me in my prophetic dreams and visions over a decade ago. I've shown you guys clips of them. I'll show some more here in a minute. But this thing with the phones that we're seeing where people are sending themselves messages like on husband to wife on phones and laying them beside and showing, hey, they are censoring not just Facebook, they're censoring our messaging apps. They're deleting stuff we're trying to send to each other. They won't let us talk to each other or share specific information. But right now, talking about the UN peacekeeping troops, China and Russia, that would come in to help us, right? Well, let's look at how China's using the social media apps to round up their political dissidents. Remember that doctor who just messaged a friend on his phone, and the next thing you know, he disappeared?
Well, a doctor who is widely credited with being among one of the first people to raise the alarm over the coronavirus in China died yesterday, as we've been reporting, but reports of his death have been raising concerns about censorship in China.
Yes, Tokes, the death of Li Wenliang, a doctor in China, well, his news spread across Chinese social media. This is him pictured in hospital. He's been widely credited as one of the first people to blow the whistle on the spread of coronavirus within Wuhan. In December, he sent a message to fellow doctors on social media, warning them to wear protective clothing against the infection of what he called a SARS-like virus. Now, soon after this, he was accused of rumor-mongering by authorities in Wuhan, but he has now passed away from the virus. But the reporting over his death has been very confused. Let me try and break it down for you. It was initially issued by state media in China, like the Global Times and the People's Daily, that he had died at 9:30 p.m. local time. This news was met by people like the World Health Organization, who expressed their sadness, but they later clarified in a statement that they did not have clear information over his status. Soon after that, you had the Global Times, one of those medias we saw earlier. Well, they issued an update saying that actually he was still in a critical condition in Wuhan Central Hospital. Soon after that, the hospital themselves, well, they then did confirm the death of Dr. Li Wenliang at 2:58 in the morning, Friday local time. But you can see the reporting over this death. This has led to an outbreak of anger. Well, they say that just as the coronavirus continues to spread, so too will the censorship.
Okay, so now I want to show you how they are applying codes to us so that they can make these lists of people, and you accumulate numbers. They assign numbers to the things you say. You know, they scan every word we say online now, the same way you can do a translate down on the bottom or a closed caption. So they have the software to go through every single word we say, and they assign a point system to us. So this goes well beyond what they want us to believe is just, oh, somebody reported us or flagged us. you know, as hate speech or whatever. So their moderators did this. No, it is so much more complex than that. It's just like I said with the alphabet agencies and the Alphabet Corporation, this was designed for data harvesting. This was designed just like we saw with Operation Jade Helm, with Jade, the AI, the artificial intelligence at the helm of this military operation. Could they discern in real time online chatter and be able to break the encryption codes and stuff and be able to seek out domestic terrorists? That's what Operation Jade Helm was. And now we have this AI at the helm that is scanning every single thing we say and giving us number assignments so we build up a tally and so that they can put us on lists. Who in the country is saying the most on the internet chatter? Like I showed you in the last couple of videos, if you haven't watched those, I showed the hard evidence. The DHS, Biden's DHS, when he was in office in the White House under Obama, their Department of Homeland Security put out a document that verbatim said right-wing extremists are the threat. I put the link to the PDF file. This is real. So they have created this entire system for this moment in time that we are living in now. And all of these social media giants, the technocracy, are working together. I'm going to show you the congressional hearing, the new one, that Trump's Department of Justice, the lawsuit that they just filed against these guys. I'm going to show you some of the testimony in a minute, that they are working together. These guys aren't even operating as separate companies moderating content. They are working together as a unit. So I'm going to show you a little clip from this video here, this one right here on the bottom. They are spying on you right now, 100% proof, cell phone, PC, yada, yada, that I put up in December of 2017. That was back when people first discovered the actual code. They found the code, and I'll show you on the screen. And they can explain it better than I can. So I think there's clips in there from Nerd City, Godrules, and then I think I'll play a clip from Project Veritas. So as always, all those links will be down below in the description box.
Hey, why are there numbers on your face? Because I put them there. Why are these numbers on my videos, though? Because YouTube's demonetization bot put them there. Right-click on any non-advertiser-friendly video, and then view page source. Search the code for excluded_ads, and then there are the numbers. These numbers appear on 90% of all demonetized videos. So, what do these codes mean? Well, YouTube isn't telling creators this, so that makes it a secret code. But, after examining the metadata...
Now look at this. Check this out here. Not even, I think it's about 36 hours later, YouTube has already removed the excluded tags so that you can't even see the censorship that they're putting on various channels. Before, for at least a day there, you could actually go and look up what things are being censored on your videos. And this guy here, Andy Worski, goes through and shows what many of the codes mean. He has a huge list that he goes through in this video. Basically, 102 means, you know, there's codes for violence, there was codes for religion, there was codes for politics, there was codes for swearing.
Anyone who swore in a video, and we searched everyone's channel, we just went, control F, found 102. Now, here's an interesting thing with 102. Certain swear words after the 102 have certain numbers. For example, in the BuzzFeed video I did yesterday, I said 3 times in the video before saying other curse words. So I had 102, 1, 1, comma 1.
Okay, so you get the point. I didn't want to play any more of his explanation because he uses a lot of foul words to make his point. And it's just too much extra effort for me to have to go through and put bleeps over all of those in this clip. Plus, I don't need his cuss words added to my tally. I probably already have a number that's like 100,000 or something, but you get the point. So the first code is what your sin is. Did you mention religion? Did you mention politics? Was it violence? Whatever it is. And then the numbers behind it note the exact specific words that you used under that topic. and they themselves have point values. Some words are worse than others, which you guys know I showed a couple videos back. My merchandise, my merch store was pulled down by YouTube, and it was marked under review for a long time. And you guys have seen my merch store. It's every single item just says Jesus. That's my thing. Hashtag Jesus. Just his name is enough. So I don't know how high the number is for Jesus behind their religious code, but yeah, they pulled it. And after reviewing it, they put it back up finally, or most of it anyway. But yeah, this is what's going on. They're tracking us with very specific information about our politics, our religion, you know, anything else, Second Amendment stuff, gun rights, all of that. And if you think you're getting out of this just because you're not a content creator, no, they're watching everything you say.
Is your iPhone listening in on your personal conversations? That's what some people are reporting online. Strange coincidences in which what they were just talking about shows up on suggested searches or on their social media.
Your Android phones and iPhones are all listening to you. Everything that you say and do in your homes without your permission. Now, what you need to do is go to settings, click on your settings there. This is for an Android phone, obviously.
We were just talking about babysitting, obviously, because we're going to be babysitting tonight. And then Joanna showed me this. A suggested page on Joanna's Facebook, fans of babysitting. How screwed up is that?
So a lot of people are pretty freaked out about this item from Facebook where they can listen in on your conversations, basically looking for buzzwords and things that you're saying. People want to know how they can disable the microphone on their phone.
And keep in mind, this is Facebook, not the CIA or NSA spying on you. And of course, we know it's the same thing. Like we talked about the Alphabet Agency and Alphabet Corporation, but the mainstreamers don't make that connection. So yeah, this is how they're using social media companies. This was created by the CIA. And wait, it gets even worse. It's not just that they're tracking you by GPS and listening to every single word you say and logging it. This will go down on your permanent record. No, you don't even have to have your phone on you. You can be on vacation 3,000 miles away from your personal computer. They're tracking where your credit cards are being used, where your ATM card is being used. And as far as these contact tracing apps that they want us to put on our phone for the COVID-19, they've been doing that forever already. They track our GPS and match it up with somebody else's GPS. And if you're in the same vicinity, you'll start popping up on their Facebook feed to see if you want to friend request each other. And back in one of the AI or Human 2.0 or one of those videos that I did on the artificial intelligence, I put a clip in there by Quinn Michaels years ago that he had discovered this, that these AI, these algorithms, this machine learning had learned to track people by their credit cards. So even if you don't have, or ATM cards, even if you don't have a phone or anything, that if you just make purchases, then they can track you that way. And that's why now we have the RFID chips instead of the magnetic strips. So now you have a code that's issued to you on an RFID chip on your card. So it's not just about using it to get money or make transactions. That is an ID.
I did a video some time back where I was like talking about how these guys went to another country. They didn't even have their cell phone with them. This is what's really creepy about it. They didn't even have their cell phones with them. They met some people on a beach that they'd never even met before. And they went to some coffee shop. So I'm thinking at the coffee shop, somehow they were able to figure out that these two people knew each other, because they get back to their computer later that day and they would see that person pop up on their Facebook profile. They didn't have their cell phone on them. They didn't know the person. They never met the person before. They didn't know their name. And all of a sudden they see their face on Facebook. So the only thing that was connected was that they were at a coffee shop and they bought some coffee. So somehow they're also connecting you by where you're located without even your cell phone at, like I say, a coffee shop if you make a purchase. So Facebook is not only listening to you through your microphone on your cell phone, they're also figuring out where you're at with your credit card and then somehow tagging you to people in the same vicinity How you know what I'm saying? This is like insane. And then, so we also have YouTube doing this as well. This, like I said, this just came out with YouTube, and they're already hiding it. They're already hiding. It's already too late. I was going to make a video about this, talking about the different codes, and you can go see how you're being censored by YouTube. It's already too late to check it out. they already covered their tracks. It's too late. So the only evidence you have that it even occurred is these guys' videos that cracked the code. And then less than 36 hours later, it's gone. You can't even go see how they're censoring you. But now you know. Now you know that.
And it's about to get a lot more insane, because they want that barcode running through our veins with nanotechnology. They want that RFID, that radio frequency, in our body, in our DNA, and in our bloodstream. We all know that's the end game. With this quantum dot vaccine, ID 2020, digital, that's one of the reasons they need to collapse the economy and have the reset, because they have to have digital currency so they can track everything, because they have to change everything over to digital currency. This tracking system won't work if we use paper money. And then, of course, the digital currency is one of the building blocks of this ID 2020, this quantum dot tattoo. It's just the way they tattooed the Jews in the camps, only this is a quantum dot tattoo. It'll be your digital identification, it'll be your vaccine record, and it'll even be your vaccine.
Social media firms must face sanction for anti-vax content, demands Labor. A new anti-vaccine misinformation task force is being set up in the UK. Calls for the government to address vaccine fake news. Scientists seek government help to stop misinformation about number 19 vaccines. Government social media to tackle number 19 misinformation. U.S. government slow to act as anti-vaxxers spread lies on social media about number 19 vaccine. Spreading anti-vax myths should be made a criminal offense.
A criminal offense.
Biblically, we can see that it's about time for some things to happen. And this whole scenario that we're living in right now fits the bill. Even more so in the coming months.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the late 19th century, the heads of the biggest corporations in America, the robber barons, got together and they set rates, they set prices, they determined how they would control information flow, they determined how they get rid of competition. And I'll be darned if we aren't right back there again. Except for this time, you're the robber barons. Your companies are the most powerful companies in the world. And I want to talk about how you're coordinating together to control information. In recent days, my office was contacted by a Facebook whistleblower, a former employee of the company with direct knowledge of the company's content moderation practices. And I want to start by talking about an internal platform called Tasks that Facebook uses to coordinate projects, including censorship. The Tasks platform allows Facebook employees to communicate about projects they're working on together. That includes Facebook's censorship teams, including the so-called community well-being team, the integrity team, and the hate speech engineering team, who all use the Task platform to discuss which individuals or hashtags or websites to ban. Now, Mr. Zuckerberg, you're familiar with the Task platform, aren't you?
Senator, we use the task system for, I think it's, as you say, for people coordinating all kinds of work across the company, although I'm not sure if I'd agree with the characterization specifically around content moderation that you gave.
Well, let's get into that. And let me see if we can refresh your memory and provide folks at home watching with an example. Here over my shoulder is an example. It's a screenshot of the Task platform in use. You'll notice if the cameras zoom in, several references to election integrity throughout on these lists of tasks. Again, this is shared across Facebook's sites, company locations, by working groups. What particularly intrigued me is that the platform reflects censorship input from Google and Twitter as well. So Facebook, as I understand it, Facebook censorship teams communicate with their counterparts at Twitter and Google and then enter those companies' suggestions for censorship onto the Task platform so that Facebook can then follow up with them and effectively coordinate their censorship efforts. So Mr. Zuckerberg, let me just ask you directly under oath now. Does Facebook coordinate its content moderation policies or efforts in any way with Google or Twitter?
Senator, let me be clear about this. We do coordinate on and share signals on security-related topics. So, for example, if there is signal around a terrorist attack or around child exploitation imagery or around a foreign government creating an influence operation, that is an area where the companies do share signals about what they see. But I think it's important to be very clear that that is distinct from the content moderation policies that we or the other companies have, where once we share intelligence or signals between the companies, each company makes its own assessment of the right way to address and deal with that information.
Well, I'm talking about content moderation. I'm talking about individuals, websites, hashtags, phrases to ban. Is it your testimony that you do not communicate with Twitter or Google about content moderation, about individuals, websites, phrases, hashtags to ban? Just yes or no. Do you communicate with Twitter or Google about coordinating your policies in this way?
Senator, we do not coordinate our policies.
Do your Facebook content moderation teams communicate with their counterparts at Twitter or Google?
Senator, I'm not aware of anything specific, but I think it would be probably pretty normal for people to talk to their peers and colleagues in the industry.
It would be normal, but you don't do it?
No, I'm saying that I'm not aware of any particular conversation, but I would expect that some level of communication probably happens. But that is different from coordinating what our policies are or our responses in specific instances.
Well, fortunately, I understand that the task platform is searchable. So will you provide a list of every mention of Google or Twitter from the tasks platform to this committee?
Senator, that's something that I can follow up with you and your team after on.
Well, yes or no, I'm sure you can follow up with the list, but why don't you commit while I've got you here under oath? It's so much better to do this under oath. Will you commit now to providing a list from the tasks platform of every mention of Google or Twitter?
Senator, respectfully, I'm without having looked into this, I'm not aware of any sensitivity that might exist around that. So I don't think it would be wise for me to commit to that right now, but I would be happy to follow.
How many items on the task platform reflect that Facebook, Twitter, and Google are sharing information about websites or hashtags or platforms that they want to suppress?
Senator, I do not know.
Will you provide a list of every website and hashtag that Facebook content moderation teams have discussed banning on the task platform?
Senator, again, I would be happy to follow up with you or your team to discuss further how we might move forward on that. But without
will you commit to it here? Senator Cruz and Senator Lee both asked you for lists of individuals, websites, entities that have been subject to content moderation. You expressed doubt about whether any such information exists, but you've also now said that the task website, you've acknowledged the task platform exists, that it is searchable. So will you commit to providing the information you have logged on the task website about content moderation that your company has undertaken? Yes or no?
Senator, I think it would be better to follow.
Hi, I'm Dr. Amy Killen. I have my own medical practice, and I've been using Doodly now for a few weeks to create these really
follow up once I've had a chance to discuss with my team what any be better to follow up once I've had a chance to discuss with my team
your company has undertaken. Yes or no?
Senator, I think it would be better to follow up once I've had a chance to discuss with my team what any sensitivity around that would be that might prevent the kind of sharing that you're talking about. But once I've done that, I would be happy to follow up.
All right. So you won't commit to do it here. We could, of course, subpoena this information, but I'd much rather get it from you voluntarily. But I think let everybody take note that Mr. Zuckerberg has now repeatedly refused to provide information that he knows that he has and has now acknowledged that he has, that Tasks has under oath. Let me switch to a different topic. Mr. Zuckerberg, tell me about Centra. What is the Facebook internal tool called Centra?
Senator, I'm not aware of any tool with that name.
Well, let me see if this refreshes your memory. There's a demonstrative now over my shoulder. Centra is a tool that Facebook uses to track its users, not just on Facebook, but across the entire internet. Centra tracks different profiles that a user visits.
their message recipients, their linked accounts, the pages they visit around the web that have Facebook buttons. Centra also uses behavioral data to monitor users' accounts, even if those accounts are registered under a different name. And you can see a shot here, a screenshot provided to us of the Centra platform. We blocked out the user's name in the interest of privacy, although you can see this individual's birth date and age, when they first started using Facebook, their last login, as well as all manner of trackings. How many different devices have they used to access Facebook? How many different accounts are associated with their name? What accounts have they visited? What photos have they tagged? And on and on and on. Mr. Zuckerberg, how many accounts in the United States have been subject to review and shut down through Centra?
Senator, I do not know because I'm not actually familiar with the name of that tool. I'm sure that we have tools that help us with our platform and community integrity work, but I am not familiar with that name.
Do you have a tool that does exactly what I've described and that you can see here over my shoulder? Or are you saying that that doesn't exist?
Senator, I'm saying that I'm not familiar with it and that I'd be happy to follow up and get you and your team the information that you would like on this. But I'm limited in what I can, what I'm familiar with and can share today.
It's always amazing to me, Mr. Chairman, how many people before this committee suddenly develop amnesia. Maybe it is something about the air in the room. Let me ask you this. When a Facebook employee accesses a user's private information, like their private messages or their personally identifiable data, is a record made of that, Mr. Zuckerberg?
Sorry, Senator, could you repeat that?
Is a record made of any time a Facebook employee accesses a user's private information, personally identifiable information, for example, messages? Is a record made anytime a Facebook employee does that?
Senator, I believe so.
Does it trigger an audit?
Senator, I think sometimes it may.
How many audits have been conducted?
Senator, I do not know the exact number of audits.
Can you give me a list?
Senator, we can follow up on that to see what would be useful here.
Will you, I'm almost finished, Mr. Chairman. Will you commit to giving us a list of the number of times Facebook employees have accessed users' personal account information without their knowledge? Yes or no?
Senator, we should follow up on what would be useful here. It is, of course, in the operations of the company, if someone reports something, sometimes necessary for people at the company to go review and understand the context around what is happening when someone reports something. So this is fairly frequent and is a matter of course. We do have security systems that can detect anomalous patterns to flag, but we should follow up in more detail on what you're interested in.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just say in closing that what we have here is clear evidence of coordination between Twitter, Google, and Facebook. Mr. Zuckerberg knows he has the tools to track this, but he either doesn't remember or won't commit to letting us see it. We have evidence of Facebook tracking its own users all across the web. Mr. Zuckerberg won't answer questions about it, can't remember the name, isn't sure if the tool is deployed in this way, and won't commit to giving us basic information. I submit to you that this is both totally unacceptable and totally predictable.
We're about to go into a dark winter,
A supplemental question yesterday, I asked this government if the people of Ontario should prepare for internment camps. In September, the federal government posted a call for expressions of interest for contractors to supply, provide, and manage quarantine isolation camps throughout every province and every territory in Canada. These quarantine isolation camps, however, are not limited to people with COVID, but provide a wide latitude for many people to be detained. Surely this government is aware of the intentions to build these isolation camps from coast to coast. And my question to the Premier is, how many of these camps will be built, and how many people does this government expect to detain?
American left and their media poodles have long held up New Zealand as the model for how to properly deal with a lot of things, including COVID. But anyone who loves freedom should take note, because the Kiwis have a terrifying new response to rising COVID case numbers. They're throwing people into quarantine camps.
If someone refuses in our facilities to be tested,
they have to keep staying. So they won't be able to leave after 14 days. They have to stay on for another 14 days. So it's a pretty good incentive. You either get your tests done and make sure you're cleared, or we will keep you in a facility longer. So I think most people will look at that and say, I'll take the test.
And in that same video that I showed earlier, the one with all the major players on the front, here, it's right over here, it's that thumbnail. In that same video, I showed all of the quarantine camps, the quarantine hotels and stuff that were being set up here in our country, in the United States, right off. They didn't waste any time. Like I said, I was shocked. They set one up right here the town over, and they circumvented the mayor and the city council. Everyone was like, what happened? They purchased a Drury Inn, or they rented all the rooms out for the next 6 months, and they have begun moving in infected people from outside of our area right down the road here from me. So FEMA's doing that. Here's just a tiny glimpse of a small local newspaper that covered it April 15th of 2020. And it just explains how our emergency management here in Illinois is being reimbursed by the Federal Emergency Management Association to throw up these little quarantine camps in these small towns. And I know that they are doing the exact same thing out in Washington state, that they were buying hotels to quarantine people in, and the sheriff there said that he wanted armed guards posted. Most of you have probably already heard of that. It was mainstream news back in March. They did this right off the bat. Seattle area officials buy a $4 million quarantine motel. This is the picture of it with the gates around it. But it makes me wonder, of course, everybody heard about this. This is on ABC News and all of the mainstream news. But when FEMA started working with these civilian emergency response teams to buy hotels or rent hotels out in small towns, I mean, I come from a really small town. We're a rural area. I thought, well, gosh, my little town can't be the only town that this is happening in. So yeah, just a few easy searches, and we have North Carolina to turn 16,500 hotel rooms and dorms into housing for people at risk of COVID-19. So as it turns out, yes, it's happening all over, and FEMA's using a multitude of excuses.
Last week, Dr. Michael Ryan, he's a leader at the World Health Organization, announced that in response to the spread of this virus, authorities may have to enter people's homes and remove family members, presumably by force.
In most parts of the world, due to lockdown, most of the transmission that's actually happening in many countries now is happening in the household, at family level. In some senses, transmission has been taken off the streets and pushed back into family units. Now we need to go and look in families to find those people who may be sick and remove them and isolate them in a safe and dignified manner.
Oh, a safe and dignified manner. Oh, because I thought you were saying that instead of us going to the hospital if we're sick or having any freedom at all, that you were saying you were going to come to our homes, break up our families, and round us up and hold us against our will in an undignified manner. So, whew, a safe and dignified manner. That's good to hear. That reminds me of exactly what the police said when they came to that gal's home in Australia and arrested her for making a post on Facebook. The authorities said they reviewed those tapes and they followed procedure, and they were so dignified, they even called her OBGYN and canceled her ultrasound for her so they could interrogate her. It was very safe and dignified.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Right. Now, you're under arrest in relation to incitement.
Incitement?
Yeah. Yeah.
What on earth? Yeah. Excuse me, what on earth?
Yeah, just put your phone down.
Can you, like,
record
this? I'm in my pajamas.
What's
I have
this?
an ultrasound in an hour.
Yeah, she's pregnant, so...
I'll take it easy. It's in relation to a Facebook post, in relation to a lockdown protest you put on for Saturday.
Yeah, and I wasn't breaking any laws by doing that.
You are actually. You are breaking law. That's why I'm arresting you.
I would also make this observation. I mean, I've seen the footage, and you know, in my assessment, the members have conducted themselves entirely reasonably. They've been polite, they've been professional, when the individual indicated that she might be late for an appointment at the hospital, our members actually contacted the hospital and made arrangements for an alternate appointment.
Today is going to be addressed to President Trump, Mike Pence, and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. And it's going to answer a big question that many of you have asked me, which is what's going on? What is going on in the state of Victoria, Australia? I'm going to tell you some things that's happening, and I'm going to read to you the news. There is some evil stuff that's going on right now, and I want to bring your attention to it. This is straight from the news in Australia. People have been asking me, what's been happening in Australia? Well, let me read it to you. This is happening in our state. There's a bill in the state of Victoria's parliament that is of grave concern to the freedom of its people. And I would like President Donald Trump, Vice President Mike Pence, and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to be aware of this, because I know that religious freedom is so important to them. So I am speaking to them as a minister of God and as a representative in Australia so that you can know what is going on over here. This is reported in our ABC News. There's an omnibus bill that is being proposed by the Dan Andrews government. This is the Labour government over here, the equivalent of your left wing in America or the Democrats. So whatever is happening here, you can basically project into your future, because whenever the Democrats win, that's exactly what's going to be implemented. So listen carefully, even though it might seem like, well, I'm not over here, I'm over in some other state. Yeah, but listen carefully, because I'm speaking to you the future of what's coming. This legislation proposed would allow authorized officers, so not the police, authorized officers, to arrest and detain people with coronavirus and their close contacts if the officer suspected they would breach emergency directions related to the coronavirus pandemic. Did you hear that language? If someone who's not a police suspects that you may break something, so that's called pre-crime. That's like Hollywood movie stuff, sci-fi stuff. If they suspect that you might be guilty of pre-crime, they will be authorized to detain you and arrest you. Okay, what does this mean? In the Australian, which is one of our big newspapers, it says that Victoria's COVID-19 omnibus legislation is an astonishing attack on democracy. So this is the fruit of godless, anti-God, in fact, it's not just godless, it's anti-God politicians ruling and having power. The Australian begins, in most democracies, the power to arrest is confined to the police and those with specialist police training. The Daniel Andrews government plans to give powers that go beyond the powers of many police to a class of person to be known as, quote unquote, designated authorized officers. There will be no limit to their numbers. Do you understand what's going on with coronavirus? Many nations have lockdowns. Obviously, there are not enough police to enforce the lockdown. There's not enough police to enforce almost anything. I mean, many people get burglarized during this coronavirus lockdown. Our church was burglarized, and the police really didn't do anything. You know, came, did a report, couldn't find anybody, and didn't suggest that they were looking very hard or going to do anything about it. So we commend the police when they do a good job, but they're stretched. They're stretched, and coronavirus is stretching them, because now they're having to enforce really silly things like not driving beyond 5 kilometers unless you have a permit. You can't go beyond 5 kilometers of your home. This is the lockdown that we have, and we have a curfew. The first power of these designated authorized officers is to be able to detain, which can mean jail, a quote-unquote high-risk person. A high-risk person is one who has been notified and diagnosed with COVID-19 and has not been given clearance from self-isolation. A high-risk person can also be a close contact. So not just you, but your family, a close contact of a person who's been diagnosed with COVID-19. But then the proposed legislation goes one dramatic step further and gives these designated authorized officers power to detain a person who is likely to refuse or fail to refuse a direction. What does that mean? So these designated authorized officers are to have the power to detain people who have not done anything wrong, but are likely to do something wrong. As the bill is written, they can arrest anyone on that pretext. And we saw these sorts of powers in pre-war Germany. Let me warn you about this, because I read about World War I, World War II. I know what happened with the Nazis. And what Donald Trump is doing with COVID is far, far, far different, opposite of the Nazis. He hasn't imposed any federal rule. He hasn't rolled in with the tanks. He's basically said it's up to the governors in each state to decide their own rules about how to contain COVID. And if they call him, then he will help. This is the total opposite of what the left wing is doing in all the other countries, including America and Australia. These are really the tactics of pre-war Germany. So who's eligible to be a designated authorized officer? Well, I bet you one thing, it won't be church leaders. You can just forget about that. It's not going to be the most moral people. It's not going to be people who are qualified religiously. First, they must be selected by a public servant who carries the title of secretary of the relevant department. The public servant can choose anyone they consider, quote, appropriate for appointment based on the person's skills, attribute, experience, or otherwise. So they said that union bosses can be authorized with this police power. Now, on my rough interpretation, that would include all my Victorian readers. All sorts of agendas are possible. For example, theoretically, union officials could be handed the incredible power of industrial relations, weapon, and of being able to detain any employer whom they class as likely to offend. Can you imagine that? The unions can arrest any employer. The bill does not stop there. The courts are to be given power to not only remove children from their parents, but put them in out-of-home care. And also to place those children in out-of-home care for a longer cumulative period than would otherwise be permitted under current legislation. The total detention of children can be as long as 30 months. That's 3 years. That's about 3 years. We're talking about such a breach of human rights, unalienable rights, that I would ask the President and the Secretary of State to consider its relationship with Australia, whether normal relations is appropriate, whether sanctions are appropriate, and I live here. There is such a breach of human rights if these bills go through.
Okay, so just in about the last 30 minutes, I've shown you clips from New Zealand, people being held against their will until they submit to take the test or whatever. They won't be released until they submit. I've shown you Canada, the Parliament meeting where they said that they had offered contracts to build quarantine camps, actual concentration camps in every province. I just showed you Australia, not just actual footage of the citizens being drug away and interrogated just for making a Facebook post that they disagree with the government. And then, of course, Britain, where I showed you several UK news headlines about how they want to make it criminal to be an anti-vaxxer.
Now there is a new union being proposed by some of the top political leaders in the countries of Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. They're proposing a new union called CANZUK. So that brings up a few questions. What is this union and what are the ramifications for it on the global scale? Well, the idea is to form a union that would increase trade, foreign policy cooperation, military cooperation, and mobility of citizens between these nations. Essentially, on a global scale, these 4 countries would try to act more as one bigger nation versus 4 smaller ones. So the ramifications of this could be massive. Out of these 4 countries, the UK has the largest economy and the 6th largest economy in the world. Canada is next, having the 10th largest economy in the world. Australia is close behind with the 14th largest economy, and New Zealand is a distant 51st in terms of size of its economy, largely due to its small population. Now, when you take into account the size of these economies, along with general economic and political influence, then this new proposed union would likely become the 2nd most powerful union in the world behind the EU. And this would also make it the 4th largest economic engine in the world, just behind China. Now, this union would also have the 5th strongest military force in the world, and it would control the largest amount of land and resources on Earth as well.
Can you see what's happening here? Can you see how close we are? Whether you don't want to get involved in politics and you're above all of that or not, they're not above it, and it's coming. They're bringing it. So let's close out with a little bit more on Operation Dark Winter. And as I go through what these members suggested and how this played out, I'm going to insert clips from that epic vision that I had from the Lord. It's this one right here. You can see that I posted it back in 2015, and I had it a few years before that. And this one here is exactly what it says: a warning dream about end-time riots, martial law, concentration work camps, and Chinese soldiers. Two things that were going on in the vision that I didn't understand 10 years ago when I had it was that we were in our homes, like there was some sort of curfew or something, and we were peeking out the windows. And the other thing was that it seemed to be after an election, because I made a comment in the dream about, thank God we didn't have a Republican bumper sticker on our car, or they would have busted the windshield out and set it on fire, because we were looking out our window at riots in the streets. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I've talked about it before in past videos several times, but I'm going to plug in a few pieces from this dream, other than what I just said, that apply to this Operation Dark Winter scenario. But the last thing I'll mention right now before I start reading is that everything I was talking about earlier with them monitoring our phones and the websites, that was something that I saw in this vision. And I didn't know what it meant. I thought, that'll never happen. That's kind of paranoid thing. And if they wanted us to not be able to call out or, you know, get access to certain information, they just shut the internet off. Easy peasy, right? But that's not what I saw. What I saw is what's happening right now.
We still had our cell phones and we still had internet, but we knew not to use it. Like, not to get on there for certain websites, and they were monitoring our cell phones, and it was crazy. It seemed to have gone on for months, this dream. And after I finally decided to try and get a phone call out to my parents, just to let them know that we were alive and that we were okay, and to tell them what was going on up north. And I used the phone, and right after that, the vision changed, and I was on a bus with lots of other families. My whole family was on the bus, and we were being taken to a work camp, a concentration camp.
Another thing that the second wave, Operation Dark Winter, included was the discussion about blocking off entire cities. So beyond just concentration camps or quarantine camps, but entire cities. Some members advised the imposition of geographic quarantines around affected areas. And I've heard that a lot from others in end time dreams and visions. Some people say they saw them blowing bridges. I think, was it New York or Detroit, somewhere, they saw them blow the bridges and the highways going in and out of the city. Here's one I put up. I won't grab a clip because I want to wrap this up, but it's Must See Prophetic Dream, the Beginning of the Tribulation. And that's a gentleman who had a series of these dreams, and he saw that happen in Texas. He said that there in Texas, all they had to do was block a few interstates and create choke points, and they had the whole city blocked off. Now, in my vision in particular, it was just roadblocks. We waited too long, and we obeyed all of their commands, and we were quarantined in our house, and we stayed in there, and the riots started, and the police came. By the time the military started rolling in, the martial law phase, by the time we figured out what was going on, they had blocked the roads, and we couldn't get out. We couldn't escape. We were trapped in the city.
And there were roadblocks, so we couldn't get out. We were trying to figure out a way to load our supplies and our family and get out and get down south where the rest of our family is. But we couldn't get out at that point, and we couldn't call out.
So really the last thing that I wanted to mention was here in Operation Dark Winter is the forced vaccination and the use of the media, just exactly how we're seeing the media and social media used right now. Dealing with the media will be a major immediate challenge for all levels of government. Dark Winter revealed that information management and communication will be a critical element in crisis consequence management. For example, participants worried that it would not be possible to forcibly impose vaccination or forcibly impose travel restrictions on large groups of the population without their general cooperation. To gain that cooperation, the president and other leaders in dark winter recognize the importance of persuading their constituents through the use of the media. And is that not exactly what we see with the total takedown of all anti-vax information, total takedown of even doctors, professionals, who are the people we should be looking to for medical advice, not Zuckerberg. No, they take down all of that, everything that might oppose this narrative to forcibly impose vaccination. That's what we've seen. And you saw in the UK headlines I showed you, they want to make it criminal to speak against the official narrative. Now, as for mandatory vaccinations, in my vision, the only thing I really saw that might be that was that once the military did come in up and down the street, they did go door to door. 2 men came to the door, 2 military men. They went door to door.
And I was peeking out the curtain, like I didn't want to be seen, but there was all kinds of chaos out there. There were neighbors were screaming at the police. So there were probably eight police cars and military vehicles just on my street. And then they were going door to door. And 2 of them came and knocked on my front door. And for whatever reason, I was scared to answer. And I grabbed my son and I ran to the back of the house and I said, don't answer it, don't answer it.
We have 2 very distinct options of leaders right now. One of those has made it clear about what's coming.
We're still facing a very dark winter.
And the other one is saying something different.
But we're not entering a dark winter. We're entering the final turn and approaching the light at the end of the tunnel.
All I know is that hope springs eternal. And if there is any resistance and any patriots left in this country, now's the time to rise and shine.